Our story begins with a race that stopped the entire world. The last cyclists from each team were ready for the final round. The crowd was going crazy. The expectation could be felt in the air, and our protagonist, putting on his helmet, remembers everything that had to happen to be in that moment. Everything had happened to get there. But to get to all that, we have to go back in the story. The protagonist, some time ago, goes to the library, and on the way, he runs into them, who didn't know what happened as he passed by them. It was too fast. He also runs into a ditch, but he jumps it without problems too. He jumps some stairs, leaving the couple surprised, but he brakes by skidding. The reason was a very steep downhill, and by chance, there were many people gathered below. They were talking about the super bike this guy had. A normal student couldn't have that bike. Some ask if they could try it. But he refuses. They had to stop begging and get on their own bikes, and they realize someone was trying to go down the hill. They murmur, if he goes down there, it's certain death. Even more so if he had a normal bike like that. But the protagonist puts on his hood. Entering a state of criticism, it was his family. They had high expectations of him. Any of his children had to be perfect. He had to get better grades because they were dropping. That way, he wouldn't be able to get into a good university. His classmates mocked him, saying he couldn't have a normal life because of his parents. Studying was his only friend. His thoughts transformed only into studying, studying, and studying. But thanks to riding down with his bike, he breaks the barrier of any stereotype. Everyone is surprised. He had just gone down the hill without braking and did a skid. It was impossible to do something like that. And on top of that, with that piece of junk bike. The guy with glasses thinks that was awesome, and they tell him. He was the student council president, but well, he didn't care in the slightest who he was. He just wanted to meet him. The next day at SUNY High School, the protagonist was studying as usual. And someone was watching him. Who is interrupted by her friend, she shouldn't be so interested in that guy. He only studied, he didn't have any hobbies. His life was only studying. He should be a person full of stress, but she clarifies that it wasn't like that. He just didn't know how to express himself. She was going to tell him if perhaps she liked him, but Minu arrives in class. Who attracts the attention of the females? She asks why he was there. Minu replies, it wasn't her business. She hadn't come to see her. She wasn't interested in an old lady. She clearly gets angry, and in the distance, this guy can be seen, who was Dom Kang, a great character. He was in love with Yuna, who was this character, but Minu had entered the class to see the president. But he doesn't even answer her. Lola, placing his hand on his notebook, asks her to leave. He was studying, but he asks if he liked riding bikes. If so, he should be part of his team. That downhill he did was awesome. His whole team was shocked to see him go down the hill, especially with a skid. And it turned out to be the very president of his class, so he came to ask him politely if he wanted to be part of his team. But the protagonist didn't even make a face and continued studying. She wonders what they were talking about. It was all very strange, and then he replies that he wasn't interested. So he shouldn't interrupt his studying, and kindly asked her to leave. Hearing that, Minnow leaves. It was irritating, but yay, which is what our protagonist was called, upon hearing about whether he liked riding bikes. He remembers his uncle gave him a bike for his 13th birthday, which had been like a friend to him before becoming an athlete. So he would like him to have it. He knew studying was important, but sometimes it was good to get fresh air and enjoy nature. If he got good enough, they could even ride together. After class, the friends talk about how they didn't imagine a school life only with exams. They imagined it more romantic, but the holidays were coming. At least it was their comfort. And Duncan appears to invite her to a movie, but is cruelly rejected. And Jay, looking outside, asks what he was doing there again. Was he following him? Mino argues that he was just making sure he was studying well, and just wanted him to give him a chance that night. Just this once he wanted to compete with him, but he refuses. He should stop bothering him. It was just childish games. Minu says there was a guy named TJ Kim. He was speaking ill of his bike that day. He considered it like damn trash. He wasn't bothered by those types of comments, but they had insulted something precious, a bicycle. He decides he wasn't going to force him to do anything. At night, his friend asks him, they had been waiting for a while, he was sure Jay would come. But he didn't expect anything about it. And just then this trio arrives. They ask if the conceited boy had arrived. That bitch must have gotten scared. Minwoo gets angry and challenges him, at least to a warm-up round. He laughs. Everyone knew he had a leg injury, although he had always wanted a rematch. However, Jay just arrives. Everyone murmurs. It was the guy from last time, the one who had gone down the hill. It was a total surprise. The guy approaches to greet him, but Jay walks right past. He asks Minwoo to start. He was busy now. They introduce themselves. First, they explain how the race will be. The rules were simple. The one who arrived first won. They just had to follow the route. For precaution, they also stationed people marking the route. And the person he will compete against will be that unpleasant guy over there. He just says not to bother him later. He was only competing for pride. Everything was ready. Comments are present. Good luck, TJ, don't be too hard on him. Kick his ass with that new carbon bike. TJ tells Jay he should try not to fall too far behind, even if it was difficult. He had a carbon bike. Minwoo asks him to just concentrate on the race, and he will film them. Everything was ready. When the nut falls to the ground, the race will begin. Ready, set, go. TJ takes the lead. It was clearly because he had a lighter bike. TJ. He was already starting to boast, asking if he thought he could beat him. He better get used to looking at his rear, because there was no way he would pass him. TJ notices that Jay might catch up, so laughing he throws a cone at him. Even the one recording asks what the hell he was doing. Jay barely dodges it, but in front of him an oncoming car appears. However, both are astonished, especially TJ. He apologizes anyway, he threw the cone by chance. The cameraman thinks the maneuvers he just saw were crazy. Jay starts regulating his breathing and accelerates, pulls alongside and states, "We should finish this stupid race once and for all," taking the lead. TJ sees the sign for a tight corner. He should slow down, but Jay doesn't. That makes him think he didn't know what he was doing. Accelerating in a curve was suicide, but Jay surprisingly skids around the corner to gain more speed and cut down the time. The cameraman has no idea where he learned to ride like that, but he rides an old fixed-gear bike, as if it were his own body. TJ just curses over and over. His carbon machine was behind, and he couldn't catch up. Jay, pointing at him, says that now it was his turn to watch his rear. He had to study, so he was going to finish this in 4 minutes. That throws him into a state of psychosis. He just wanted to kill him and win. TJ closes the distance, and on that hill, he would catch up. The cameraman shouts. They had to brake. They were crazy. There was a gate at the end down below. They had to slow down or they would crash badly, but neither of them slows down. Jay, for his part, upon approaching, skids and almost crashes, hits the gate with his leg. To balance his speed, managing to pass. As for TJ, he tries to brake with all his might, but his bike breaks from applying so much force at such speed, ending up slamming into the gate. Jay just mumbles that he was a loser. TJ, bleeding, says nothing, just clenches his fists in rage. Minwoo is playing, and they shout that someone had already arrived. He is surprised. That man he spotted had broken a new record. Everyone was perplexed. The one reaching the finish line was Jay. Minwoo approaches and throws the helmet at him. He reminds him of what he said before the race. He must never bother him again and leaves. Everyone thinks, damn, that guy is stubborn. Minwoo sees the cameraman arrive and asks what happened. He immediately asks for the first aid kit. Everyone is worried, but TJ just yells that they must take that damn fool in right now. Then Jay arrives home. His brother scolds him for not coming home earlier, and even less for riding his silly bike. But his favorite series starts, and he leaves him alone. In the shower, Jay recalls everything that happened. He thinks it was very strange. He had never felt that way. The next day he goes to school and sees that his wheel is ruined. The brother scolds him again. He should leave his bike to save energy for studying. He had to grow up, but he sees a kitten and goes after it. That's me. As for Mia, she was on public transport. The atmosphere was tiring. Others were talking. Everything stank. They had to find another way to go. And Mia, looking ahead, sees Jake. And she speeds off. Her heart pounds. As for Duncan, who we now clarify is a person from a wealthy family, or from the mafia, they ask him if he hit the cars in front to pass. But he asks them not to, and looking out the window, he also sees Jay speeding. And he also gets encouraged. He wanted a bike. And next to Jay, surprisingly, appears the school principal. In class, Mia asks why he came by bike. As the day went on, Duncan continued trying to get Yuna's attention. Mia kept looking at the president, and at the end of the day, Duncan meets Jay. He asks him to please lend him his bike, but he leaves without saying anything. The protagonist walks, and finally his tire gets a flat. "Yun, want me to fix it for you, you piece of crap," is heard. It was TJ with two other people, and walking in the distance, Duncan also appears. TJ expresses that he couldn't even sleep because he was so pissed off, but Jay asks whose bike it was. That irritates him, kicking his bike. He must be arrogant, and before finishing speaking, Jay punches him in the face, which causes the three guys to give him a tremendous beating. Now he should remember who he was, but Jay says he still didn't know. They will beat him up again, so he can reflect, but Don Khan asks them to stop. They only felt tough because it was 3 against 1. He will join to make it more interesting. TJ thinks he's an idiot. They were also going to beat him up, but a trembling guy behind him asks them to leave. That guy was dangerous. Upon telling him something, he agrees and leaves immediately, without forgetting to call the protagonist a loser. And he should thank him for having a friend like him. Khan looks proud and extends his hand to Jay, who asks him to forget about him. It was fine, he could leave. Don thinks that everyone around him acted as if they didn't like him. As for Minu, these two girls approach, and a comment comes to light. Just for having money, he has women around him. Seeing that Jay was there, she says goodbye to them. They ask what happened to him. Kan tells him what happened. Minu apologizes for dragging him into something like that. The protagonist just asks them to get out of his sight, although they only wanted to help, angering Don Kan, who hits him in the neck, sending him to the ground. He supposed he was going to be fighting the whole time, so he decided to do that. They take him home, but to their naivety, neither of them knew where he lived. And they hear someone shouting Jay's name. He was very scared. He sees the guys as a threat, so he decides to leave. He didn't know who he was, but they notice the huge similarity. They must be brothers, no doubt. Shouting, he asks him to stop. He must help them. He had pretended not to know his brother because he had to protect himself. After treating Jake, they search his room and Kan finds a photo. It was him as a child, but with the same bike. Minu realizes that he has been riding the bike since he was little. He remembers that he had no intention of competing until they mentioned his bike. Kan, seeing Nimmo, for some reason, sees Yun reflected. Minu also thinks she knows the person next to Jake, and he wakes up just then. He asks them to give him the photo and asks what they were doing in his house. They argue that they were good friends because they treated him and brought him home. And since they were there, they should reveal their dark secrets, opening his computer. But what they found were only recorded classes for studying. Duncan thinks he was there now. He is going to show him the true path. Minu says, "Oh master, please show us the way." And Jay asks them to leave right away. The brother, outside the room, thinks he wasted a lot of time with those 3 idiots. And upon opening the door, he finds a grim scene. After all their master plan, they say goodbye, and Minu makes a call. His group must have an emergency meeting, and TJ must attend. Upon arriving at the scene, everyone was perplexed. They had never had such a sudden meeting. And Minu, upon arrival, just punches TJ, asks that his 3 friends must leave the crew. They had stained the name of their group by hitting people, but TJ argues back. Kei hit him first, and his actions were not those of a leader, so he proposes that he leave the group. Although he was the leader, many thought the same. Everyone was against him, now that with his injured leg he couldn't run. They all accepted him for his money, but now his money couldn't make up for his physical capabilities. Minwoo gets angry and proposes a relay race. Even with his ruined leg, he could beat him. He gets angry and accepts it would be a 3 versus 3. Junso would also participate in Minwoo's group. TJ asks if anyone wanted to compete in his group, but no one raises their voice. Minju believes it wasn't necessary, they would compete alone. The next day it is explained that the race was a relay. They propose Jae, but he didn't want to drag him into any more fights, he didn't want to get him in trouble. As for Jae, Mia gives him some bandages, but he rejects them, which angers Junna, complaining that he couldn't act like that. His friend had been worried all morning about him, and Kang gives him a comforting punch. They ask when they became so close. That was because a video united them. Jun extra asks Jae to come, there was a third-year guy looking for him. Junso thinks maybe he doesn't remember him. Here it is explained that Jae has a facial recognition disability, but luckily for him, he does remember him a little. He explains everything that happened in his group, and asks him if he could please join his 3 versus 3 group. Jae apologizes, but he couldn't. He didn't want to see his group ever again. Junso resignedly just tells him they will meet in the same spot as last time. Later that night, everyone gathered. They were all anxious for the race. The two friends resigned themselves. It was already past 8. They would have to compete without him. TJ shouts that he shouldn't push himself so hard. He could end up with both legs broken now. They were about to start, but she arrives. They are surprised. It was a commentator. Her name was Hee Dilly. She hoped to broadcast the race live. She starts recording and makes everything more interesting. The race consisted of having a baton, which would be passed to the next participant until reaching the finish line. And they will use these LED light sticks, which could transform into bracelets. In summary, the runners will be at designated points to pass the batons. The one who arrives first wins. And having said that, the losing group will be expelled from the organization. And the guy asks if they were sure. They had a huge disadvantage running with one less person and someone injured, but he just accepts. Whoever it is, they will win. Everything was ready for TJ. The first runner was Hyojin. Minwoo asks Junso to run the first leg. He will take care of the other two. He will give TJ a beating. They were already in position. Everything was ready on their marks. Ready, set, go. Jerry Lee comments, both teams are going at a speed of 26 kilometers per hour, but Sangmo High School takes the lead at the start. The one in front tries to confuse him, telling him that he was always behind him because his leader was Minwoo. Just as pathetic, but he didn't notice that he was also right behind him the whole time. He tries to break away, but he can't, and he feels enormous pressure. He got very tense. Harry Lee expresses the cyclist behind him was using slipstream. That was a technique so that the person in front cuts the wind for him, thus exerting less effort to advance. That a high school cyclist could use that method was extraordinary. The other guy finally realizes, but Junso passes him and thanks him for breaking the wind for him the whole time. He shifts to the heaviest gear and climbs using a squid dancing or swaying his hips to gain speed. Minwoo says, here they come. Changing the bracelet from arm to arm, Harry Lee expresses. The second runner for the high school begins the second leg. Junso just asks that his friend doesn't get hurt in that race. TJ was anxious. He couldn't see his partner anywhere and there he comes, or so he thought, because the one who passed was Minwoo speeding. And in a streaming signal, someone who will be important in the future appears. Minwoo was going at a phenomenal pace. He would win by a long shot, but a cat crossed his path by chance, breaking and injuring his leg, causing him to fall to the ground at high speed. Jerilipai apologizes. She has to cut the transmission due to an accident. Tejota only thinks about catching up, and upon seeing Minwoo on the ground, curses him. He knew he couldn't lose to trash like him. Minu on the ground resigned, doesn't want to know anything, but a shadow appears, asking what he was doing lying on the ground. Like a crying sissy, it was Jade, who puts on the bracelet, but don't be mistaken. She was only there to return the favor of treating him and taking him home again. Minu smiles and asks her to teach those losers a lesson. The woman notices that bike, and it gets her attention. As for TJ, he sighs in relief. He knew the result. He could never beat him with a leg like that. And Minu was saying he had a monster behind him. He better be careful. And TJ feels something behind him. It couldn't be true. Where the hell did that bastard come from? He speeds up upon seeing what happened. It was as if a dog was chasing him. But he just had to pass the U-turn and he could win. But upon remembering his fall, he breaks in fright. But Jake accelerates and performs a skid. But not only that, he stops in the middle of the road in a 180-degree turn. And face to face, he asks him if he had insulted his bike before. It was the perfect opportunity to see if his luxurious bike was faster than his junk. They were going to race as fast as possible on that straight path, and thus they could know the true winner. And if you lose, don't blame your bike but yourself. They were ready, they start again. TJ takes the lead, but Jay with one breath speeds up and passes him in a second. The crowd realizes that the competitors were coming. Minu excuses me, I couldn't finish the race. The other guys mock them, they had beaten the rookies, but a red bracelet is seen approaching. TJ didn't understand why his bike couldn't catch up to a loser like him, and a bracelet passes the finish line first. Everyone was stunned. Mino clarifies that everything was ready. They should take care of their group, since he knew that race was illegal due to an unregistered third member. But he was happy he could go with his friend. EJ throws the helmet at him and leaves. The reporter sees that bike and smiles, so he must have inherited it. The guys wanted to celebrate because the others were already out of their group, and someone calls him Viper Boy. That angers him, but upon seeing who it was, he calms down, and the guys go to his house. That guy was one of the most dangerous ones there. As for Minwoo, he arrives home, but after arguments with his parents about his stepmother, who he always treated badly, since he thought she was only there for his father's money. They hit him, and upon seeing what their son did, they kick him out of the house, and his sister in her room thinks it was all her fault. Remembering the past of his mother, his family, he couldn't understand how all that had happened. And getting to where things were now. And he sees someone drinking a soda and it's Jay. He tells him not to cry over losing a competition. But he wasn't crying over losing. Jay leaves, but he tells him to wait for him, asks him if he could stay with him that night. He follows him to his house, begging him to please give him his eye. At that moment, he was on the street. But Jay didn't care. He should ask that of another friend, but he would like to do that, but he really had no one to ask. And closing the door, he assumes they weren't even close, and it starts to rain. We are told that Minu was always surrounded by people, but it was all because he had money. Seeing that, he also put on a mask to fit in with them, but at the end of the day, he was always alone. And somehow he managed to get a bike, and that's how he got out of his loneliness. But even now, his bike group left him alone, and looking at the ground, he saw a small shivering kitten. He remembers that damn cat was the culprit for his fall, but seeing its little injured paw, he believes he couldn't change the past. So he offers it some food. He asks if it was also alone in this world. After a while, Jay's brother, who wonders why one of the louts was outside his house. And he realizes it was one of his brother's useless friends. But he is perplexed because he has a kitty in his hands. Jay opens the door and sees Minu, and the brother argues that he couldn't leave him in the middle of the rain. And injured on top of that, and he also brought the slob because he was with the kitten. He argues that he will leave as soon as the rain stops, but Jay throws him a towel. The bathroom is over there. He would stay just for today. When Minu is at the fridge, the protagonist's mother arrives and recognizes him, accepting him for being a person from such a renowned family. She also scolds Jay about his grades. They had dropped. If this continued, he would never see that bike again. In the room now, Minu tells him that thinking about it now, his life was also crap. But even so, he envied him for having a mother. He asks him when he started riding a bike, and the idea of creating his own cycling crew occurs to him. But Jay just thinks he's talking nonsense. They should sleep. He turns around angrily, but he doesn't care. He could convince him over time. His mother had given him permission to stay longer. The next day, he smells something tasty that makes him get up, and upon seeing Jay looking like that, he bursts out laughing. He should share it with everyone, and Jay walks past with the plate. Clearly that food was for the cat. He had to prepare his own food, obviously. Then a call to the grandfather is present. It was Chae-lee, his granddaughter. She tells him she was going to Korea. The next day, June tells Jay he must attend a meeting at the student center. But clearly it was a trap, so that Mia could meet with him. Everyone was already in the cafeteria, and Mia arrives, who had gotten dressed up, and no one recognizes her. She looked like a model, but she argues that she only used contact lenses. And at another table was this redhead guy, who overhears talk about his appearance. He gets up and confronts her, knocking over the table. He warns that the next time he drinks, he will pour it on him, but Duncan stops him. The redhead throws his cap at him. They will leave. They will continue that elsewhere. On the other hand, the director's daughter walks by, attracting all the looks. But some random thieves steal her bag, and by chance, Jay was passing by there, and he immediately starts chasing them. The thieves wonder who could be following them, especially on a bike. It was impossible for him to catch up. But Jay takes a shortcut, although that shortcut was a dead end, but that was not a problem. He uses the car as a ramp and goes over the wall at full speed and manages to catch up, jumping towards them, crashing into them and falling into some boxes, but he manages to recover the bag. The blonde asks if he was okay, but he just gives her the bag, takes his bike and leaves. He informs his group of friends that he couldn't go to the meeting. He had had an accident. Everyone is disappointed, especially Mia, and when going to the bathroom, she runs into a cameraman who thinks he has good style. He gives her his card in case she wanted to work with him. Jay takes his bike to be repaired for the recent damage, and the person working there was the same journalist from last time. She lets him know that her uncle was a professional cyclist, and not only that, he was the first Korean to win a tour of all time. His uncle had achieved the impossible. Recognizing that he was her nephew and seeing one of his bikes, she will fix his bike for free in honor of her uncle. And she also shows him this poster, the Street League, an underground cycling competition league. And the winning team would take 100 million yen, but he refuses. He had to study. She insists he should at least think about it, and he realizes that when leaving he lost his wallet. The blonde had it, and upon seeing the grandfather, she asks him to help her find this guy. The next day, they surround Jay, worried about what happened to him, but the teacher asks them to sit down. They had to introduce a new student. All the students get excited about how beautiful she was. Curiously, she liked cycling and traveling. Seeing the protagonist, she smiles, approaches him and gives him a kiss on the cheek. Everyone was furious, even the director himself, who was watching from the window. She hadn't managed to thank him before, so this was his reward, and she also had his wallet. Then Mia becomes sad and remembers her past. She was always bullied by other girls, but the president extended a hand to her while others avoided her. She didn't believe herself brave enough to declare her love. She hated herself for the way she was. Then after class, Minu presents him with the Street League pamphlet. They needed to form their own crew so he could leave home with the money. He tried to convince him in every possible way, but the protagonist had no intention of participating. But upon seeing a man on television who spoke about his uncle and was also a participant in the Street League, he was very sad not to be able to see the star compete anymore. Referring to his uncle, after his death he was very sad, especially because of the doping incident. But if he were still alive, most likely he would no longer compete due to drug problems. He understood his feeling of wanting to win, but doping to improve performance was sinking too low. Those words strike Jay deep inside, making him furious and expressing to Minu that he would participate in that damned competition. After a long discussion about deciding the name of their crew, the blonde joins the conversation. And she also wanted to be part of his team, and Duncan, upon hearing, also wanted to join the team, even without owning a bike. In another scene, several people were excited about the street league. Then, the redhead was being whipped for his misconduct, discipline, and all his actions. If he messed up one more time, they would expel him from school. As for Don Khan, he had bought a bike with his boss's money, but it turned out to be a total scam. But his boss found out, so they had to do something about it. And without much time passing, they found the whereabouts of the one who scammed him. Khan arrives, but he is in a very good mood because of a chocolate given by Yuna, so he just takes his bike and leaves. Upon arrival, his buddies try to teach him a few things. He does it quite well. But the bike was too fast, and at one point, he just disappeared into the horizon. The next day, he arrived. His legs were very sore from practicing all day. And his butt hurt too. Mia asks Jay if he could also teach her how to ride a bike, and she had also made a logo for his team. But the blonde didn't want to lend her team member, creating tension between them. Later at the bike shop, they report a participant who was an ex-rugby player. But due to an injury, he couldn't continue. He changed sports and had now been reborn as a true beast, who could reach 100 km per hour at top speed. And he was part of the monster team in the street league, scaring everyone about their chances of winning. But her and Lee present them with these machines that would serve them. Khan wanted to try them, but upon getting on, his balance wouldn't let him stay up. Jerry gives him some advice, and Jay gets on and has a great time, since he practiced that exercise many times with his uncle. She explains that Jay had a unique technique. His upper body was completely stable. His pedaling style, without a doubt, had a lot of practice and effort. The next day, everyone gathers to practice with Jay. He tries to teach Mia, which creates a somewhat romantic scene, angering the blonde, interrupting them and asking that she also didn't know how to ride. And here it is also told that Minu had been in love with Mia for a long time. At the end of the training, Yuna is waiting for Can, but some guys approach him repeatedly asking for her number. But Duncan appears to defend her, beating up the guys. Although Yuna asked him to stop many times, making her angry and judging him. But he, for the first time, gets tired. He thinks he couldn't do anything else. Since she was from a millionaire family, she surely thinks he is trash and a thug. Like all of them, and he leaves. And as a result, the guys he hit were friends of the redhead, who upon showing him a photo asked TJ if he knew this guy with long hair and a patch on his lips, and he finds out who he was, and they will also look for Yuna. At the end of classes, everyone realized that they were not acting as they normally did. And the guys were waiting for her in the afternoon. And Dom, at his work, receives a call from Mia, crying, asking for help. And without thinking twice, he gets on his bike and speeds off. Here it is explained what happened with Dom Khan and Yuna. A subject was asking her to spend the night with him, but she didn't want to. Appearing on the scene, asking him that his father would not be happy with his attitudes, so he should leave. In the following days, everyone murmured about his family. It was from the mafia. Yuna, after a series of arguments, sets him straight. Kang's story was of a person who always got into trouble, a typical gang member. But he did have the power of a mafia. But Yuna showed him the value of life and that he could move forward with good deeds, becoming the first person to support him in that life. And that's how he radically changed, becoming an exemplary human being. Returning to the present, he was speeding to help Yuna. Jay and Minu see him just then. Finally, Dong Kang arrives on the scene. The redhead expresses, so he was the one in the cafeteria. They were waiting for him. Someone had to pay the consequences. What they wanted were his front teeth. But Duncan picks up a lighter and clenches his fist to knock them down, and a single punch to the Chinese guy. He warns them. They couldn't run away. Everyone gets irritated. He clearly wanted to be beaten up. Yuna tries to argue. They should end all that and go their separate ways. But that couldn't be resolved that way. And Duncan unleashes. They couldn't do anything. If they called the police, they would also punish Duncan, and Minwoo asks him to calm down. He had followed him to make sure his friend was okay. They hit him. A long time had passed since they saw him. He never thought he would also be friends with that loser. He asks him if his leg was okay, and Duncan is still hitting. He would take care of the redhead. He couldn't touch him. And also, now Jay was observing the scene. Seeing his classmates being beaten, he drops his backpack to the floor. He will join too. And in the distance, TJ and others were recording the show. Duncan and Dean start their fight. Dom lay on the floor. The friends mocked. With just a few hits, he couldn't do anything against Viney anymore. He takes off his shirt, laughing, proclaims himself the winner, but a bloody Dome was laughing. He asks who said that was over. One of the two had to die for the battle to end. The redhead tries to land a punch, but is hit on the head and another blow lands. Another and another and another. Yuna hugs him, asking him that it was enough already, calming him down. Everyone freezes. Viney had been defeated, but the redhead's friend with a bat tells him that it had been enough. He's going to smash his skull with a hit, but lights appear at the scene. Seeing the situation, he grabs Vinny. And he retreats, but TJ had recorded everything. The next day they are asked to go to the principal's office. They show him the video. They give him a very long lecture. But the principal states that it was enough. He cannot let that incident of violence go. It was an unforgivable crime. Whatever the reason, starting tomorrow everyone would be suspended. The three of them are very sad about what happened. Minwoo thinks if his parents find out, they will kill him. Dom apologizes. It was because of him that they were there, but that wasn't necessary. Friends were there to help each other. He couldn't doubt that. In Dom's eyes, Minwoo was a true man. They asked Jay if he was okay, but he was literally in shock from the suspension. Looking at the principal, he remembers a meeting he had with the representatives who mocked his school because they had seen a group of them signed up for the competition. And everyone knew that in their school they didn't even ride tricycles, they wouldn't even pass the preliminaries. That had angered the principal. For that reason, he had suspended them so he could train them. The next day, the three were gathered. The principal knew a lot about cycling competitions, so he provides them with very strict training. They all end up cramped. They wanted to leave, but the principal argues he is going to give them a mission. If they succeed, he was going to revoke their suspensions. They had to take the tires and drag them to the top of that hill with the bicycles. Jay and Minwoo were doing well carrying the tire, but Duncan kept bouncing it. Here the principal gives him advice to improve his pedaling. He was unbalanced. Pedaling wasn't that simple. He had to apply force both upwards and downwards. He shouldn't lift his feet off the pedals. With that advice, he dives back into training. After spending the whole afternoon training, Duncan had also managed to control his pedaling. He was dizzy. He felt guilty because his friends were now bearing the weight of having him as a teammate. They asked him to leave. That was all for today. However, he wanted to stay a little longer. They understand each other and leave. It was already night, and Duncan was still training. On the corner, he realizes his girlfriend was there. She had found out he was still training, so she brought him chicken so he could recover. At that, he apologizes. He had broken his promise, but she tells him it didn't matter. The truth is, she was grateful. In another scene was the redhead, who remembers everything that has happened lately. And he sees a downhill stretch. That was the downhill where he and Minwoo competed that day on that track. They were competing to see who was the better of the two crew leaders, and in that race, he wanted to feel alive. And he did reckless things, causing both of them to fall and causing Minwoo to injure his leg. The next day, he had only one cigarette left. He didn't even have money to buy, and since he is no longer in school, he can't steal from anyone. He will have to ask his mother for some money. His mother was working at the mall cleaning. A badly behaved boy thinks that what she had on her face was something weird. She remembers when she and her son went out on a snowy day. He asks her if she could make him something to eat. Something like fried pork. But she asks him to wait a little. Next week she would have some money. The boy drops the Pokeball, she goes to hand it to him, but the mother stops him, it could be infected. And in an oversight, she turns and hits this chick with a broom, who asks her to watch where she moves that thing, treating her very badly, making a scene. Vinny hears the altercation happening, and really, that chick treated him very badly. Seeing that, he fills with rage, asks her what she was doing on the ground. She asks who was that piece of shit. Grabbing the broom and breaking it, he was going to hit the woman, but the mother, seeing that, asks him to stop. He states that she shouldn't let herself be treated like that, they should have respect, but she tells him it didn't matter. She just needed a little more money, and she would quit. That makes him have a small memory of the past, going crazy and trying to attack the woman. But upon looking back, his mother was unconscious. At the hospital, they tell him that she was in the final stage of liver cirrhosis. Her condition was very serious right now, so the only treatment option was a liver transplant surgery. But the cost of the surgery was around 50 million won. In the past, children always bullied him for being a mutant with red hair and different colored eyes. They beat him up just for being different, humiliating him, telling him that next time he should bark when told. But an impact from a bicycle hit the bully from behind. There he met Minhu, who came with his bodyguard, who threatened him. He couldn't hang out with him again. At school, the story didn't change much. They kept bothering him, and a maternal act of giving flowers to her son for his new school humiliates him. Everyone starts laughing at him and his mother's face. That was the first time he raised his voice to his mother and asked her to leave. Later, the guys from before beat him up because he had to bark, mocking him and also mentioning how ugly his mother was. That awakens fury in Vinny. He asks them to stop. He was going to hit him for being insolent, but they stab a pencil in his arm and land a blow to his face. At that moment, he realized something. There are things he has noticed in his life, and that is that people who want to trample him and walk all over him is because they are different from them. He feels that the only way to survive was to finish off those bastards in their own game. So he prefers to turn into a crazy rabid dog and tear everyone apart, since the world is damn unfair anyway. Facts, man, facts. But his mother's hand brings him back to reality. Then looking at the horizon, he sees that he has no cigarettes left and remembers that incident, the day his house caught fire. His mother came very sad for not being able to give food to her son, and upon seeing his house on fire, she doesn't hesitate for a second to try to save her son. And when he came and woke up, he saw that his mother was covered in gas. She had saved him. He just shudders with rage for everything his mother was going through, and a league sign appears in the background. The next day, the buddies are training, and Duncan takes the lead for the first time. They did it, the three of them had reached the top of the hill, with the tires tied. A brief pause to show the characters of this wonderful series, so you don't get confused. And also, if you are enjoying what you are watching, please like and subscribe if you are not subscribed. And we continue with the video. The boss was great at training. He asks them if they wanted to join the league. He had done all that so they would polish themselves as much as possible to participate. Then they are training, and a group of cyclists comes who were great. They dominated Cadence. They were a very complete group. At Jerry's shop, the redhead went to sell his bike to raise money for his mother's operation. It was a very good bike. She asks why he wanted to sell it, but she didn't care, he just wanted to sell it. And upon seeing the sign, his gaze fills with hope. She was going to give him the money, but he was gone. The friends only see the shadow, and upon entering the shop, they tell him what happened. He had left, but the street league sign was gone. He goes to register, but he couldn't do it individually. He definitely needed a group, and this guy tells him not to bother the lady, and he realizes that it was the phenomenon from when they were little. He offers to join his crew, but Vinny would rather die than join them. He offers him to compete, but he didn't want to. However, he uses his past traumas to convince him. At night, the guys in white and the redhead were gathered. If Vinny won, he would help him register, but if he lost, he would owe him a small favor. It is explained that Vinny didn't have a bike for racing, but rather one for tricks. Everyone was ready, and by chance, Duncan was passing by there because he was chasing a guy who had sold him fake sneakers. Surprised to see the two people riding at incredible speed. The two were going at a very good pace, but the one only followed his back, so he would take advantage of a bump there for him to fall. But Vinny manages to dodge it with a maneuver. He was better than he thought. A child was also playing with a sword, and he steals it. They reach a tight curve, so he brakes so as not to fall. However, Vinny doesn't brake and doesn't slow down for long so as not to lose speed. He was very good. Nevertheless, they had reached the place where he would take the lead. Everything was dark for Vinny. He couldn't see absolutely anything, and some very powerful lights blind him. And without realizing it, he was already in the air. When he opens his eyes, he only saw a bunch of people in white clothing, and upon looking at the bike, the sword was stuck in his wheel. He blames him, but he has no proof of anything. It was a race with street rules. Anyway, he just had to accept his defeat, but he had to stay calm. For losing, he just had to fulfill his favor. They were just going to cut off his legs, so he never ran again. But that was making a joke. His rules were that the loser's bike would turn into trash, smashing it to pieces. With a lost look, he complains about how he could do something like that. A kick lands on his face. They remind him that freaks like him cannot do that sport, and now that he had no bike, he saved him from resigning himself to his dreams. The next day, someone was looking for Minhu. It was Vinny's friend. He apologizes for everything that happened. He was completely remorseful, but now they needed to help Vinny. They were friends when they were little. He was the only one who could change his friend's course. If he continued like this, he doesn't know what could happen to him. Clenching his fist, he shouts at him to please help him. He explains his friend's situation. He needed to pay for his mother's operation. That's why he wanted to compete. Besides, some idiots had broken his bike. That competition was Vinny's only salvation. Minhu didn't know if he could help him. Everything depended on the condition of his bike. And behind them, a cry is heard. He remembers what he did to his beloved, but despite that, he was still a man. They should help him. Minhu asks him why he is trying to help Vinny. What was his motive? He remembers his past. At that time, he tried to commit suicide, but Vin saved him. However, he only tells them that it was because he was his friend. At night, Mia calls Minhu. They had seen the redhead stopped at the police station. He had gone into a fight with two guys and beat them up. They arrived to get him out. They ask him where he got the money to pay the bail, and he had sold his motorcycle. Minhu scolds him for how he could do that, especially if his mother was sick. He shouldn't get into those kinds of problems. Hearing that, he complains, how could he go around telling his life like that? He wanted everyone to know that his life was shit. He yells at him that he only told him because he needed help. He shouldn't do idiocies like that. He was very wrong in life. Minhu asks them to calm down. Calm down. For starters, he was the culprit of his miserable life. Minhu didn't understand anything. He explains that his mother had saved her whole life to set up her business, but his millionaire father built a huge supermarket, driving her to bankruptcy. He was born into a shitty family where only bad things happened. Today, he only thinks about sleeping and never opening his eyes again so as not to suffer again. Upon saying that, he is hit. They yell at him, so why didn't he just die? And that's it. Doesn't he remember what he said before? He was ashamed to have called him a friend all that time. And he leaves. Seeing the scene, Minhu asks him to calm down. He apologizes. He had no idea what he had to go through because of his family, but he would accept him into his group for the competition. That way, he could help his mother. Besides, Zhang was really worried. He even went to his school to help him. He should call him if he was interested in competing. And arriving at his house, a new bike was waiting for him outside, with a note that said, "If you have the courage to die, then use it to change yourself." In the past, he used to bother Zhang. He stole his backpack, his shoes, his money. He went through hell at his school. He hated himself for not being able to do anything. School was hell for him. The only way to end that hell was for the idiots to die, or for him to die. Vinny, upon seeing him at the edge of the school, tells him he was a loser just because they bothered him a little. And he was going to end his life. He gives him a talk about why he shouldn't commit suicide and ends with the phrase, "If you have the courage to die, then you should use that courage to change your life." He clenches his fist. In class, he asks them to pass him his money, but he refuses, and they throw him against the locker. But he remembers Vinny's words, landing a punch. After both of them being beaten by so many hits, the guy tries to hit him with a chair. And he is interrupted. He couldn't do that. He had to behave like a man. He had to leave. From that day on, Sung was never bothered by his classmates again. His life changed thanks to those words. Returning to the present, everyone was trying out. The new uniforms looked great, and in the distance, Binny is seen. That was his new uniform. They had to forget everything they had been through, and looking at their friend, both thank each other with their eyes. They tell Jay that the competition was about to start. If he was anxious, and he remembers everything they had been through. All those moments. He was indeed very excited. The principal tells them that the preliminaries are tomorrow. Were they prepared? They affirm that everyone had worked hard and trained hard to be in shape. This professor, whose name I forgot to introduce, was a professional cyclist in the past, who was hired by the principal to supervise his boys. He asks who the redhead was, stroking him lovingly, making everyone nervous about what was going to happen. Vinny can't stand him, but the others calm him down. Everyone was happy, but Mia realized that Jay wasn't happy at that moment. It was very strange for him to be like that. He had many conflicting thoughts at home. They were challenging him a lot. They demanded better grades from him, but his uncle's words also appeared, to take his dreams forward. The day of the competition had arrived. It could be felt in the atmosphere. It was spectacular. TJ's crew was also there. He, as always, tried to belittle them, and upon seeing Vinny, he gets very nervous. It couldn't be that he was on his team. Vinny also observes the guy who broke his bike. Signs of surprise appear. It was the Will Bull crew. They were the clear favorites to win the competition. They had a member from Temer, Monster 13, the guy who raced at kilometers. The preliminaries were about to start. All the representatives of each team had to be present, and after several opinions. The one left as representative was Duncan. That competition, thanks to the principal, was going to be broadcast in the school. Everyone starts seeing that the one on TV was Duncan. His friends were surprised. They never imagined seeing him there. The representatives of each team were positioning themselves at the finish line. They will explain the rules once more. They had to arrive before 5 minutes 30 seconds to pass the stage. If they couldn't do it, they would be disqualified. In other words, if they don't arrive in 5 minutes 30 seconds, the entire crew would be eliminated. Before the competition, they had complained if they could change the representative, but they had already signed. It couldn't be changed. Duncan was in trouble. At that moment, he should be under enormous pressure, but they trusted him. They had worked very hard to be there. Next to him was Monster, the 100-kilometer subject, the shark who boasted of being a Ferrari because he was so fast. The guy who broke Vinny's bike, the otaku, and TJ were with this girl. Everything was ready. Dom thinks that if he didn't pass this preliminary, he would disgrace all the effort of everyone. His only option was to give his best. Everyone starts positioning themselves for the race. DOM. He was too scared. The pedals felt very heavy. Monster, to his surprise, was behind him, but he starts taking deep breaths. And his pedaling turned into pure strength. The two guys were side by side. TJ. Upon seeing that he couldn't catch him, he gets frustrated. DOM. Thinks that monster positioned himself in front in a few seconds. He thinks his heart and legs are going to explode, but he just had to finish. There was still time left. He just had to hold on just a little longer, but in front of him there were cyclists on the ground. The unthinkable had happened. Everyone saw Don fall. TJ looks back and is happy. He always had very good luck. In 3 minutes and 19 seconds, there had been a collision group. Approximately 2 minutes remained. It would be impossible for them to make it. They ask if he was seriously injured. To his bad luck, his illusions had ended. The doctors were checking the injured. Dom needed first aid immediately. His injury could get worse, but Dom just asks how much time was left, and upon hearing the time, he continues the race. The others think he is a fool, he should give up, he wouldn't make it in time. What's more, his tires were punctured. At the finish line, the representatives of Monster and 3DN crew reach the end, but by a few seconds. Monster takes first place, and the other competitors started arriving. Only one competitor remained in the race. He was 800 meters from the finish line, with 1 minute left to arrive. Lucia, quite injured from the accident, it will be difficult for him to arrive. Dom refuses. He couldn't end it like that. He couldn't give up. He remembers his past. His father was always busy with work. He never understood why he always left him alone. He explains to him that at some point in his life, the time would come to have a responsibility. At that time, he shouldn't try to pass it on to someone, but rather face it and become someone trustworthy. And at that moment, he didn't understand it. In his adolescence, he thought about being tough like his father. He beat everyone up for no reason because he didn't like them. His only pleasure was saving his parents money to buy sneakers. Then he met his friends, with whom he felt comfortable. His values started to change. He just wanted to create good memories with them. And now, for the first time, he understands that. The responsibility his father talked about. Shouting, he says he will take responsibility and take his friends to the next level. He pedals with all his might, to the point of being so focused. He doesn't see that he crossed the finish line, falling so as not to hit the wall. With tears in his eyes, he had done it. Dom's time, 5 minutes 29 seconds. He gave his best effort. In fact, upon finishing the race, he vomited. Everyone was very proud. As for Jay, these guys mock him. That was the guy who was always in the library. They had seen his race. His representative was pathetic. He should clearly study, they were too bad. Besides, he had a bike that he must have found in a dumpster. It was pathetic. The group wonders who would race the next stage. Duncan was out and Minu was the best option. They ask for Jay, but he should be reading books. They were angry because he didn't watch the previous race and went to study. But he just showed up. He asks to borrow his helmet with a serious look. He wanted to compete in the next phase. They support him. They say that neither Vinny nor Dom had seen Jay compete. They were going to be amazed. They were going to see a real monster. The second round was trekking, with several curves, sections, especially mountain ones. There were a lot of curves, as well as many descents with dangerous inclines. Rounds 1 and 2 are combined in time, meaning Monster would start with an advantage in seconds. And for Jay, he would have 4 minutes 30 seconds to arrive. They had 10 minutes to reach the finish line between the two times. Upon hearing that, Dom feels very guilty, but he shouldn't worry about that. They had to be sure that Jay would finish before 4 minutes. They had explained to him that if his bracelet reached 0, they would be disqualified. In the first groups, many are disqualified. It was harder than it looked. At school, they realized that their president was in that competition. It was awesome. The 7 competitors were in position. There was Jay, the women's team, the Pegasus guy, and the other guy who had mocked. He tries to humiliate him again. He shouldn't hurt himself. He just had to take a nice family ride on his bike. The competition will start in 5 seconds. He thinks that light bikes were the best for a good start, but the girl and the Pegasus pass him immediately. Competitors 10, 65, and 41 were leading the first part. Dom, seeing that, asks him to please go a little faster, but Junsol asks him to calm down. They shouldn't sprint like in the first race. There were many downhills, so there was a chance many would fall at the beginning. Eva competed from number 10 of Crew Tarantula, then number 65 of Manga Crew followed. Everyone asks why they weren't focusing on the president. It must be because he was a loser. They must have left him far behind. The protagonist had 2 minutes 37 seconds left. The guy ahead curses. Another curve was coming. Braking, but Jay accelerates and skids. Rider 55 just passed rider number 38 in the curve and launches an attack. Everyone in the class is stunned. Even the professor, Mimeo Express, the hunt had begun. What is happening? Competitor number 55 had already passed 3 competitors in an instant and maintained a good pace. Don asks who the hell that guy was. Mino states that damned bastard was crazy. He always raced inside the red zone. The first group was now entering Zone B. The annoying one gets frustrated. He couldn't catch the woman and the otaku. At that moment, Jail observes. Seeing that the 4 were even, however, a tight curve approached. The woman wonders if they were crazy, in case they were trying to commit suicide by not braking in that curve. The Pegasus shouts that he should stop, but Jay, leaning his body, does. The protagonist manages to pass the tight curve. Unlike number 41, who doesn't manage to brake and crashes the curve. Everyone, absolutely everyone, from the class is stunned, the students, the crowd. The crew, even his own crew. The woman and the otaku fail to get close, and the second round of the 7 competitors ends with competitor 55 arriving in first place, who arrives with 1 minute 9 seconds to spare. He had a second record in the preliminary round with 3 minutes 20 seconds. Dom cries. He had achieved the impossible, and at school everyone was happy. They had never seen anything like it. Everyone wanted to come by bike tomorrow. They called Jay Lord of the Bikes. The competitors had never seen him in the city. They wondered who the hell he was. Jay goes back to look at the guy in yellow and thanks him for telling him the words from before. And leaves. Someone asks how he did that curve. That rookie had got everyone's attention somehow. The atmosphere of the race became completely intense. There was a worthy rival for Monster. After a while, they realized that Jay's tires were completely worn out. They thank him. Thanks to him, they could pass the next round. This green-haired guy looks at Jay's bike. He wondered what kind of bike he used to ride in such a devilish way. The guy in the cap tells him to leave with his crew, and Dom realizes that he was the one who sold him the fake sneakers. He asks him to end it peacefully, and Dom, looking at the ground, tells him if they had to end it peacefully. The guy will never forget that. He asks him to take everything except his sneakers. Once, a woman stepped on his shoes and hit him because of it. That level of affection he had for his sneakers. Vinny was on the bike. He was doing standing, which is maintaining his body in balance without pedaling. Who admires what his partner had done? The group of women tells him that he was very good at standing. They invite him and his group to hang out later to share information among themselves while having a drink. He gets angry. They didn't know that minors couldn't drink, but the teacher calms him down. The scene was very noisy. Everyone turns to see what was happening, and the green-haired guy recognizes that guy's face. He remembers that guy was the famous Riccardo Rossi, champion of the Giro d'Italia. No one could believe it. He looked a little strange, but if it was him. It was a pleasure to meet such a respected cyclist. His students had just found out who he was. Also, race number 8 comes to an end. Crew Fiffant Group arrived in first place, and competitor 8 of Crew Zephyrus has reached the finish line. With that, all the preliminary races concluded. Dom, on the way, looked a little confused. It was because each participant had strived hard to reach the finish line in the shortest possible time, even if it was just a few seconds. But those seconds could mark the difference between tears and smiles. He doesn't think he has experienced a day like that, where every second counted after spending every day doing nothing. Really important in his life. That time was the first time he felt that time was valuable. The professor is proud. If they had a day like that, it was more productive than any training. In the future, when they graduate, they will face equally tough things in their day-to-day lives. He hopes that if they live with the awareness that every second counts, they will be able to hold their heads high in any situation. He hopes they enjoy that time for themselves, doing the things they like to do. Because they only have one chance in this life. There is no reset button here. Upon arriving home, his brother was watching the race, but pretending he was watching cat videos. Minwoo notices a marked date, and then sees a lot of thinking it was for Jae's birthday. The brother says that their birthdays weren't celebrated, it was just another day. He notifies all his classmates the nerd has a birthday. When they arrive at school, Jae is a superstar. Everyone praised him, and the students started arriving at school on bikes. Dom tells him that they would have training in the afternoon, he shouldn't miss it. Poor Dom, he couldn't hide his intentions. Upon arriving at the supposed training, the whole crew was there, and upon entering the room they were waiting for him with a surprise party. Jae apparently wasn't very happy, but everyone had contributed to a gift, they hoped he liked it. Jae thanks them, and everyone ends up dancing and covering Jae's helmet with stickers, creating a scene of friendship. All the friends created a very strong drink to get Jae drunk, but by chance. The blonde drinks it, causing her to get drunk immediately. Literally, she was wasted, and upon seeing the protagonist all alone, she launches the attack. Everyone is stunned by her way of acting, confessing all the love she felt for Jae. Giving him a kiss. The friends demand that they should stop them, or else it would be the end of the manga, breaking the fourth wall. The guards go to see what they were doing, but upon seeing, they just think they were enjoying their youth. Then after that, Yuna challenges them. How could they think of giving him that drink? Hours later, Mia took Chaeli to her house, so they wouldn't be discovered. After a talk, Mia declares her love for Jae. She admired him for his actions. She could never do that. She gives him advice to behave however she wants. She shouldn't care what others say. Life is only one. When she is older, she will regret not doing the things she truly felt. First, she must start by loving herself more and believing in herself. In class, it is seen that the protagonist really liked his helmet. He didn't even take it off to attend classes. At night, following the advice, she takes the card from the cameraman guy from last time to meet with him. They tell him about the whole project. A new season is coming, so he needed girls of her style. On the other hand, Jae and Minwoo went to fix his bike, and he asks him that he has to make his relationship with Shelly official. But the protagonist didn't care. He asks her if she didn't care about the kiss, and there, she just blushed and asks to stop. Minwoo explains that Mia had liked him for a long time, but Mia liked him, but he could stay calm. He would leave the path clear with Shelly. The next day, Vinny wakes up because his mother was home again. He had asked her not to leave the hospital, but she couldn't stay away from him. She had to graduate to have a good future. He just bites his lips in rage, and the crew members arrive. He was going to be ready right away. The mother thinks it's good that he has friends. Today the crew competes. The venue would be street construction, a death match by teams. That track was complicated. There were many structures, also many obstacles. Security personnel would be in the area for possible accidents. First, 2 riders from each team will represent their teams and must finish together. The groups can use any variety of techniques to help their team, and the team that has a rider crossing the finish line first will be the winner. The competitors think that today's race will have a lot of blood. The first match was Hummingbird versus Smart. These blue guys versus our beloved Hummingbird crew. They had to choose 2 competitors. Jae volunteers. Everyone is amazed. Jae had never been so active in competitions. Most of the time, he just isolated himself. And the next rider would be Vinny. He had wanted to race with him for a long time. They wonder what kind of duo that was. They wanted to compete against each other, not collaborate. The 6th battle between teams, Hummingbird versus Smart, was about to begin. Those from his old school were perplexed. The guy on TV was Vinny. Even Jae's brother had already become a fan of his brother. Well, in his own way. The professor was trying to teach, but all his students were paying attention to their superhero president. The opponents were concentrated. They had to compete in cooperation to be able to win. He was going to block them so he could take the lead. Everything was ready, on your marks. Set. Marth's team leaves at full speed, very close together so the wind wouldn't hit them head-on. But looking back, Jay and Vinny were catching up to them. Vinny expresses that he enjoyed chasing and capturing his prey from behind. Jay asks what the plan was, but there was no plan. They simply had to reach the finish line before he did. Accelerating, Jay does the same. They were approaching. He was going to take care of blocking the redhead. They had to take the lead. They shouldn't think it would be easy to pass him. There were many pipes and obstacles on the right side. Only a crazy person would try to pass through there. If he left that path clear, he couldn't pass, but when he turned around, there was no one there. Vinny had gone over the pipes, it was impossible, and when turning to the other side, Jay passes. They were screwed. The audience is once again unable to stop being surprised by the hummingbird crew. His former teammates wondered who Vinny really was. He was doing amazing things. The professor turns off the television. They had to give important information, but he had 0.3 seconds to turn that television back on before it died. The leader was exhausted. He was also very scared. He was being chased by two wild beasts. Now, even the school professor was giving advice to win the race. The crews watching the race believe that Jay and Vinny had the race won. The chick had fallen in love with Vinny. The leader didn't want them to catch up, but he couldn't stop pedaling. After coming so far, Vinny gets in front of Jake so he wouldn't pass him. His team is desperate, they were being very reckless. The guy smiles, thanks to that they wouldn't be able to pass him, and a tight curve was coming. He will have to brake so as not to end up dead, but Jake and Vinny pass sliding at full speed on the side. To his bad luck there were pipes, however, the two jump over them, hitting some, creating a sort of barricade for the guy, making him crash. Those kids were driving him crazy. The hummingbird crew had reached the descent of Area C. The two were taking the slope at too much speed. They asked them to decrease speed, but both were in the red zone. Vinny brakes with his soul and skids, but as for Jay, he turns his bike 90 degrees, creating a work of art. His brother goes crazy. He was awesome, but his mother behind him asks him what he was doing, realizing that the one on television was Jay. The two continued at full speed, but the protagonist suddenly brakes. He thought his front tire was braking right now. They were screwed. They knew that would happen. They were too reckless. The other guy gives his friend the greatest strength. He asks him to avenge him. His sacrifice would not be in vain. Shouting, he asks him to catch up, and he will get rid of all his dreams. Vinny had to move forward. He had to finish the race. Now the two were at the Celeste guy tries to overtake. Vinny had changed his hand position. That was an aerodynamic posture to slightly increase his speed so that the air wouldn't slow him down. The guy asks him to get away from him. He couldn't always stick close like a leech, and an arm of machinery was in front of his eyes. Vinny didn't move aside. He couldn't do anything. He desperately asks him to move, but after an intense encounter, Vinny Hong from the Hubin Beer team has finished first. His team was very happy for the victory, but with a point of guilt for what happened. His teammates were proud, now not beaten with their fists, but with their bicycle. They ask for Jay, but they were calling him, and suddenly he leaves without telling his friends anything. Then, the following races were finishing. Monster's team, the Sharks, the one who broke Vinny's bike, the Otaku, the women's group. They had qualified. Upon arriving home, Minu smiles at Jay's mother, but notices something strange, and upon arriving home sees that the protagonist had been beat. His brother asks for forgiveness. It wasn't intentional, but he calms him down. He was just trying to encourage him. As for Vinny, he was late for his new job. They threaten him that if he wasn't on time, they would fire him, but he sees the Otaku. They were beating him up because of his tastes. They treated him very badly because of his way of thinking. Vinny, that situation reminds him of his past, so he stretches out his helmet. They ask him if he was friends with that shit. He replies no, they were going to hit him from behind, but with his reflexes, he stops it and starts beating up everyone. The chubby guy thinks that red-haired guy was a Tachi because of his eyes and used the Sharingan. and the otaku friends also appear. They thank him in Japanese, he leaves, and now they owed him one. They would always be grateful for the Uchiha clan. The next day, Jay asks them to meet. His ambitions lay elsewhere, so he would leave the group. Everyone is disappointed. The only one who accepts the decision is Jansu. Later, at home, they ask him about Jake, about his decision, but it was because of this. Opening the door, the bike was chained, but the Rossi had a plan. On the board, he writes the question, if you had 1 week to live, what would you do? He recounts his experience. Before, he had a girlfriend, who eventually fell in love and got married. A long cycling season passed. They rarely saw each other due to his hard training. He received a call before his race from his wife, but he couldn't answer at that moment. While she was dying of pain. After finishing the race, he had to go to the hospital with the stress of moving to another country and living far from his family due to poor diet and suffering a lot of pressure. For a long time, she suffered a miscarriage. He kept his pink jersey, but he couldn't protect the woman he loved, and in the end, she left him. Finally, he lost everything in his life, so he didn't care about the opinion of others. After the night, the guy who broke Vinny's bike came looking for him with his whole crew. They came to challenge him. However, he refuses, he would never race again, he will retire, but he stares intently at Mai. And so his days went. While his crew trained, he studied, but from studying so much, his nose bled. And the second part of the competition had arrived. Hello everyone. The live broadcast of the next round began. Before, the rating wasn't very high because not many knew this sport, but now it was very good because of how extreme it had become. And the good competition. And unlike other races, this will be a team race. The track was 7.5 miles. Each team will receive a flag with their team logo drawn on it. It will be a relay competition, and any team that crosses the finish line first wins. But they could only have a maximum of 7 participants per team, and the first to race would be Team Perfect versus the Monster Crew. Jay, for his part, asks to take all the exams at once, and the moment the professor went to the bathroom. Jay was gone. He had finished all the exams, and cut chains appear in the scene. As for the race, the monster wins, with a hellish sprint at the end of the race. The sharks win the other races, the tarantulas and the otakus. It would soon be their turn, and Vinny's hand hurts from the bat blow they gave him. The red team was bothering the blonde, so Vinny kicks them. His friends arrived to see what was happening, but nothing was happening, since if they said anything, both teams would be disqualified. The red team guys just wanted to kill them, and the reflector team appears again, this time to give them a new challenge to win the competition. They didn't want it, but this guy did want it, and the competition between Bullet and the hummingbirds is about to start. And this time, Chelly would race for the hummingbirds. The guy tells her he won't let her win just because she's a woman, but she's going to shut him up. The race starts, and she manages to overtake because of her light frame. However, number 18 should take the lead. A little confused, he wonders if they were going to switch immediately in the competition. But Chelly takes the lead. Minu's job was to slow them down, so he positions himself next to him. The player guy was anxious, although he knew there was a long way to go before it was his turn. He felt very anxious. After a few minutes, a change comes, so now they block Minu so he can advance. Number 18 was about to catch up, but it was Sung-Oh's turn, changing gears to take on the mountain, taking the lead and also gaining a big advantage. The drugged guy watches Sung-Oh pass by. His team was damn far behind, and the next relay was Dom. Running at full speed. He had a big lead for the next relay, but all the spectators are amazed. Behind Dom and Bunevesk. Dom feels the pressure. He asks what was going on with that lunatic. The white-haired guy arrives at the scene, with a woman who is surprised because Vinny was there. It was the chick from the mall. At school, everyone had finished their exams, so they would watch the competition. Dom and the drugged guy go, at full speed. That sprint was too intense. The drug really worked. Dom gives his last breath to put his team ahead, passing the flag to Vinny. It was the guy's turn to pass the flag. But to everyone's surprise, he doesn't pass it and keeps going, leaving his teammate behind. Vinny felt the pressure and the presence of that guy. He was bumping him in the curve. He tells him his wrist seemed weak, hitting him, causing Vinny to have a nasty fall. His flag was on the ground. He remembers his mother, and all hopes had fallen to the ground with that flag. But a gust of wind lifts his hopes. The Lord of the Bikes appears. The drugged guy wonders where that guy came from, out of nowhere. The rookie Jay from the Hummingbird team suddenly appeared. He appeared dramatically right at the moment his team was in crisis. The gap between the riders was gradually narrowing. Jay followed him with a terrifying cadence. Now the two were side by side. He states that he was at his best, so he should just stay behind, gaining a beastly momentum. If he entered the tube, there would be no way they would pass him. It was only one lane, they report. Finally, they were entering the final part. On the other side of the tunnel was the finish line, and the Mullet team was in the lead. It seems there was already a winner. He smiles. It was over. He would be the winner. However, a shadow makes itself noticed. Jay was in the red zone. He had gone around the tube, passing at 90 degrees. It couldn't be. In the 8th race, Jay from the Hummingbird team was the winner. But Jay was very tired, losing consciousness and falling. The doctor asks them to calm down. He was just sleeping. He had pushed himself too hard. The teacher, upon seeing all of Jay's evidence and work, sees what he wrote in that question, about what to do if you had 1 week to live. And he answered, go on a bike trip with his friends. The white-haired guy was complaining about wasting his drug. The subject from before was in a critical condition due to ingesting them at that moment. The woman complains to them that they should do something about that red-haired boy. Vine recalls what had happened. And at night, he sees Mia with the photographer, who the next day everyone finds out was in fashion magazines. But that also brought them problems. Everyone was spreading rumors about her, especially a group of women. Although Minu tried to stop them, he couldn't do anything. A photo with the photographer had gone viral. She must have been sleeping with him to be on the covers. The group in white, seeing the photo, found a way for Jay to compete against them. The photographer was their friend. They set a trap for both of them to get a photo where Mia was seen with a beer with men. So they called Jay. If he didn't show up, they would share those photos of his friend. He remembers what was happening to Mia, so the day had arrived. His mother stops him, but he doesn't break. She screams that if he went, he couldn't come back home. Then it had arrived. They hand him the photos. He had marked the route to be able to compete. Whoever reached the finish line first would win. And the other condition is that the loser's bike would be destroyed. On your marks. Set. Go. The guy had a complex about his brother. Who was the white-haired one? He had told him that if he raced against the rookie, he would lose, so he would prove the opposite. The track was complicated. It had just started raining, and there were many people. The masked one makes a maneuver to make Jade crash into the car door, and indeed, Jade is in trouble. But he gets up full of fury. As for Minu, he didn't understand his mother's way of acting. That same night, he would leave. He thanks her for everything, and also his brother. He would go look for Jay. The subject went confidently. He could break his bike and shut his brother up. But looking back, he sees Jay leaning on the car from earlier, taking the lead. Seeing that situation, he grabs an umbrella for a plan. He demands the motorcycle guys stop recording for a second. He was going to kill that rookie. He was going to do the same thing as the redhead, but Jay sees the shadow. So now, with his reflexes, he does a drift, surprising him, making him lose balance. Looking at the ground, he curses him. That couldn't be. His group breathed a sigh of relief. His boss was coming, but the one who showed up was none other than Jay. He had won, but he didn't care about breaking his bike. He just shouldn't share his friend's photos, but he was a man of his word, breaking his bike. As for Jay, they were outside Vinny's house. He remembers the same situation he experienced with Minnow. But Vinny asks him what the hell he was doing there, he should pass. He gets a call from Minhu, who is also going there. Vinny thinks if it was an animal shelter, or what the hell. The next day, the rumors had increased, putting Mia in trouble. Her teachers were outraged by the scattered photos, making Mia break down in tears. And Minhu untangles everything that happened and finds out that the ghost gang had done it. So he goes to confront him. Man, he is the literal meme. All of you against me alone, but after several blows, he was on his knees. There were too many of them. They were going to break his legs, and he published the photos because that woman was easy. But a chain blow, the one landed on his nape, Vinny and Dom had arrived. It was an unfair fight anyway. It was an army of white shirts versus them, but Vinny is going to give them back everything they did to him in his childhood. They all attack together. Vinny lands a blow, but they land a heavy blow to his nape. However, it was nothing to him. Laughing, he takes him by the face and slams him against the wall. Then he is hit by everyone, but he manages to land more blows. They wonder who the hell they were. The mustached guy was like an animal. Hangyan gets up thirsty for blood, with a sledgehammer in his hand, and all the others follow him. Taking sticks. They were lost, they were going to end up dead, but the beacons are heard. Everyone had to flee. The next day, Mia's rumor was totally denied by the photographer, who went to give explanations in person. At night, they gathered to train, and Mia was back. Minhu got very nervous, and after a conversation about everything that happened, she thanks him. She had found out everything he had done for her. Minhu tells her he liked her, and promises he will give his best in the next race. It was a promise. The next day, the race will start shortly. Minhu asks them that he wanted to race. There were far fewer participants than before. In the previous 2 stages, many people left. Today's mission in the race was street elimination. That race will take place on the asphalt road. 2 people from each team will participate for a total of 7 teams in each group. They had to be strategic. They should at least ensure that one of their participants reaches the finish line. The racetrack will be 3 laps. The complexity of the tracks were the tight curves, and the most important rule was that every time the participants complete a lap, the last 3 participants will be eliminated from the competition. Basically, out of a total of 14 participants, 9 will be eliminated, and only 5 teams can continue in the competition. Group A consisted of Monster, Hummingbird, Ghost, Stabilize, Tsubarashi, Antiwin, and GT. Minhu's plan was to put Dom in the lead, as he was the strongest. They couldn't knock him down, he would stay behind and attack at the end, and that way they could reach the finish line without being disqualified. He just had to be careful with the curves, and watch out for the bastards from Ghost Crew. They don't know what they could do. The race begins. Each group fought to take the lead. Monster Crew's group was falling a little behind. The guy from Ghost takes the lead with a new and improved bike. It was one of the most expensive on the market. Dom couldn't position himself well, but he promises he will take the lead. He had made a promise, and he always keeps what he says, overtaking one by one. Minhu knew he would do that, but he wonders how much longer he could keep up that pace. And they had to be careful with the monsters behind them. 3 participants were leading the competition. The curve comes, and one of the 3 falls for not having enough space, causing the GT guy to fall too. 2 had already been eliminated. The last one to cross the finish line would be the only one eliminated. Dom was the leader. Everyone admired his endurance, but everyone knew his energy would run out soon. Monster started positioning himself, the competitors were speeding up, everyone starts accelerating. The finish line was close, and the last one to cross is the GT team, which is disqualified. Now 2 laps remained. The red-haired guy wonders how could he maintain that pace for so long. Dom was possessed. The ghost guy asks his teammate to fall and vote out the mustachioed guy. He had to do it for his team. He would take care of reaching the final. Minhu started attacking again, and as for Dom, he was only thinking about riding like a demon. The white shirt guy starts his plan, so he had to overtake to vote out Dom. Minhu thinks Dom was just pedaling like crazy. At that pace, Minhu would end up abandoning the race. He sees the ghost guy approaching Dom. He shouts at him to be careful on the right. He apologizes, but both will have to fall. Dom was in trouble. However, Minu appears and crashes into him. And he remembers what he promised Mia. Bleeding, he stands up and thinks about riding again. But that was useless. He would already be disqualified for finishing last. But he pedals with his soul. Everyone admires him. He was riding, even though he had no chance of qualifying. He was giving it his all. Even so, they were reaching the finish line, but Minu was too far behind. However, a cry from the bottom of his heart is present. The last lap is in your hands. We trust you. The red one, Minu, and the ghost guy were eliminated. It was the final round. The riders were giving their last energies. Rider number 84, Dom, was in the lead. That guy's endurance was incredible. He maintained his pace from the first lap. No one had overtaken him, but Choi from the ghost team began to advance in the curve. That guy's bike was helping him to pass everyone. They couldn't believe it. Dom was still riding at that speed, but Ghost was taking the lead. The redhead refused to fall behind. Dom states he didn't care about losing against any guy, but there was no way he would lose against a guy like him. The competitors were getting dizzy, fatigue was becoming present, and the monster guy unleashes the beast. Monster finally started pedaling. The two were pedaling for the lead. But a bullet passes in front of them. The beast had unleashed its enormous speed. Everyone laughed. The result was clear. How could they beat that beast? But for a moment it couldn't be true. Dom was catching up to Monster. The teams were getting close to the end. The finish line was right in front of their eyes. The competitors were giving their souls in the final stretch, and the final result was Monster in first place, Hummingbird in second place, Ghost in third place. Dom vomits upon finishing. He had given more than his soul in that race. They congratulate him. He had done great, and Monster approaches him. That had been a great race. He was eager to compete with him again. Everyone present felt great admiration for those two beasts. Later in the following days, Minu goes on a date with Mia, which they had a great time. And watching the sunset, he ends up kissing her. And all the friends see him because they were spying on him. Jay appears by the script's coincidence. They spent days without talking, and in class Jay's mom comes to cause a scene. He had to return home, and because Jay refuses, she is going to slap him, but they stop her. They had to go to the office. They talk and they understand each other. The protagonist had to return home. At home, they give him the lecture of a lifetime. But in summary, he should focus on his studies and give up cycling forever. But the next day was the race. Jay had not shown up at school. Group C was decided. Trident, Fruit Crew, Hummingbird, Zephyrus, and Colin Crew were there. Finally, they were going to confront them. The fruit guys had also accepted the drugs given to them by this unknown guy, sent by the white-haired one. The fruit group hated them because of a party where they had put Dom and Vinny in their place. And the competition was about to start, which was about protecting the king. First of all, the competition would take place in groups A, B, and C. 4 riders from each group, and they had to select a king. The only rule, the king must cross the finish line. The last 2 kings to arrive will be disqualified. After the other races, Group C was in position. Everyone had to be ready to start. The pineapple head attacks Jay at the start for being the king, but Dom interposes himself. He will be his guardian, but because of the fruits they fell behind in the competition. They try to vote out the pineapple head who was the other team's king, but that guy was quite tough, making the Celeste guy fall, but it was clearly because that guy ingested what the other guy with glasses gave him. But Hummingbird takes the lead, using the leader as a windbreak. As for Jay, he was too distracted. His mother had caused him a lot of confusion, and a racer overtakes. The shark had shown its teeth, and it starts raining suddenly. A heavy rain started in the race. Mia only asks that he doesn't end up injured like last time. The shark was leading. Jay also launched an attack so as not to lose the lead, but the fruit group appeared blocking the boss. He was going to pull the pineapple head so he could position himself. It was a very good strategy, but Dom goes out to the house. However, they block his way so the pineapple head can get loose. Jay and the shark are in the lead. However, the protagonist remained unfocused, his mother's words penetrating his conscience. It was a very heavy burden, and the pineapple head appears next to him. He was focused only on knocking him off his bike. But to everyone's surprise, TJ appears. He was also angry, but he owed Vinny a favor for forgiving him the time he posted the photo. So he had agreed to help him just this once. And when the pineapple head got loose, upon hearing the plan, he launched an attack too. He complains to Jay, has he always been this bad? His friends were striving, and he was only causing problems. Looking ahead, he had to accelerate. The shark was too far away, the pineapple head wouldn't let him get away, and TJ had no energy left to sprint. The other competitors think the rookie was distracted today. It was his chance. The pineapple head was catching up to Jay, but the beast appears. But he wonders, who the hell was that guy? The pineapple head was too tough to be a normal person, leaving him behind with an uncommon sprint. Jay was starting to slow down. The schizophrenic pineapple head had caught up to him. He launches with all his body to knock Jay off. However, JJ grabs the cylinder on his bike, throwing his body backward, delivering a kick, making the pineapple eat pavement. Everyone gets excited. These guys were watching the race, and the mother hears the noise and realizes that Jay was the one racing. The Trident team rider finishes in first place. The Hummingbird team remains in second place. And Zephyrus crew arrived in third. After the race, Jay's situation hadn't changed regarding the fact that his mother had confiscated his bike, so he would focus on his studies. His friends helped him find it, and they tracked it down. It was in a completely destroyed junkyard. Jay is completely devastated, to the point of going to confront his mother at work. But she had warned him about that situation, so he made a drastic decision. But the protagonist, for the first time, tells them to stop meddling in his life. From now on, he was no longer her mother. He was an idiot for hitting her, and he complains to his friends. All of that was his fault. Then he asks his brother to forget about Jay. He was a very bad influence, and suddenly Jay sees some guys smoking and shouts at them to put out their cigarettes, wanting to fight. In the following days, it was revealed. He tried the cigarette, he didn't bring books to class, but his friends realized that the recycling bike wasn't the same. The saddle was different, and they had found it. A child had it, but he runs away when he sees that they think he will steal his bike, but Dom was in that place, reaching him immediately. He recognizes him. It was the famous Dom Kang from the Hummingbird team. He was a big fan. He says that he picked up that bike from a gentleman. It looked a lot like his hero's bike. So he bought it, but that bike didn't look the same. That was AJ's bike. Then with great sadness, he hands them over, and Dom gives him his uniform. His friends had brought his bike. It was back. During lunch, he thanks them in the next race. He will concentrate as much as possible to win it. For the first time, they hear Jay say something human. He tells why he joined that competition. He wanted to hear it from him. The reason why his uncle was involved in that doping incident and his death had to do with Sango. And Choi. The story of Monster is also told, who after his injury, his entire team wrote him a letter. They would go to see him in his final, because he was still number 13 on his team. And the day of the race had arrived. The mission of the fifth race was a death match. As its name indicates, 2 teams from each group will compete to eliminate the other team. Equal to or less than 7 participants per team will have to compete in the format of the previous race. And the first participant from each team would win the encounter. And before starting, they would announce the matchups. The confrontation for our Hummingbirds was against Monster. Everyone offers condolences. I forgot to mention that that race had been fixed for Jay to be eliminated. They didn't want him to reach the final because of his uncle's past. Dom is tasked with dealing with Monster, and Group A's race was about to begin. Hummingbird versus Monster. The death group was 10 seconds from starting. Dom remembers what they told him. He was the only one who could face him, but he believes that they hadn't even gone more than 5 months. But they remind him of his races. He was capable of anything. Monster's team was going to try to stop Jay, so Vin and Kaylee would keep Monster's team under control. Junzo and Minwoo would lead their way. He just had to follow them. 3-2, one Hummingbird team versus Monster team's race had finally begun. They fought to get in front. Monster had a slow start. Jay and Vinny had taken the lead. Everyone believed they would use their trump cards from the beginning. It was very exciting, but the shark doesn't think so. They were increasing their chances of winning. It was just the beginning. The two speed up. They ask Monster what they should do. He replies that they shouldn't let the gap widen. Minwoo asks Dom to stay behind them. The guy next to him thinks that subject had acted like that since the beginning of the race. He thinks he was a drug addict to act like that. A Monster participant, who was the rookie, sprints to catch up to Jay, so he doesn't break away from the group. Monster's team finally started moving their super rookie, causing him to now position himself in front. Braking, crashing the wheel with Jay, making them lose speed. Vinny thinks he was an idiot. He had only braked Jay, but he could still continue. However, with a breath he catches up, putting pressure on him. The second lap was completed. The one who gives the drug asks if they didn't use drugs. How could they ride like that and not get tired? Junsu thinks he should go faster now, otherwise Dom couldn't overtake anyone. Chelly leaves the line. She couldn't let them be beaten like a bunch of fools, giving way to Junzo. Minwoo and Dom. But Jay replies that something was weird, and Junzo's strategy takes place. Attacking from the outside to catch up to the leaders, everyone started increasing their cadence. Little time remained to finish the second lap, and only the last one would remain. Monster should accelerate, but Chelly had a plan. They had a lot of difficulty passing her, and they had already entered the final lap. The last downhill slope. This is where the winner would be decided, accelerating and hitting shoulder to shoulder against the leader. But it was a trick, making him brake and giving way to his superstar. Jay was going to perform his well-known stunt, but his chain breaks, flying into the air. Emergency personnel were running over there. His team gets worried. They were going to stop to see him. However, Jay shouts that they should continue. They must hurry, giving them a bucket of cold water of realization. Only half a lap remained. Vinny stayed behind. Monster took the lead. Minwoo activates the plan. It was time to attack. He tells Dom it was now or never. He would take responsibility. He didn't care what happened. Monster's team also activates. It was the moment of truth. Finally, they would have a sprint race, releasing the escort and the beast. They were 500 meters from the finish line. The leader says that his role ends here. Now everything depended on him, and Dom and Minwoo take the lead, followed by Monster's beast. And his escort. Minwoo shouts at Dom he had to be faster, giving him the signal, releasing the hummingbird monster. And next to Minwoo, a bullet was passing. Everyone thinks Dom will win, but a shadow lies behind him. It was like a beast, which breaks all hope of everything, passing him in the final meters, and declaring the monster group as the winner, leaving everyone frozen. It couldn't be true. Our protagonist's group had been the loser. Upon finishing, everyone goes to Jay to see if he was okay, but he asks for Dom. However, he wanted to be alone at that moment, everyone arriving together to ask him what the hell he was doing there alone. He stands up, looks at the ground, and apologizes. He was so ashamed of himself at that moment that he couldn't look them in the eye. They worked very hard to get him there, and in the end, he ruined everything. They calm him down. They had given their best. And that was enough. But he argues, crying, that Vinny's mom needed that money and he wanted to help her. Vinny replies that he should stop crying. When he joined, he never thought about winning. He just wanted to have fun. He should stop crying and go drink. And Jay tells everyone they did very well, making everyone cry out of frustration. The guys from the Ghost were talking about their whole plan. Finally, they got rid of the hummingbirds. Now they could reach the finals. They just had to make a plan for Monster to lose, but a shadow had heard all of that. Back home, Dom couldn't stop remembering what happened, but Yuna appears, he needed to have yes. Or yes, a haircut. He asks his reason for living. All he knew was how to hit people when he was furious. He wasn't good in any way. She calms him down and will lend him her shoulder for just a moment. Dom cries, but a couple passes by. It was strange, two girls hugging, so she pushes him. He should stop crying. On his part, the white-haired one remembers his past with hatred, and Uncle EJ was the first Asian in the Tour de France. But someone interrupts. It was Monster. He needed to talk to him. He came to ask for explanations about his fixing. He denies everything, but his brother's crew release the whole truth. But that didn't matter anymore. In any case, it was direct elimination, but he argues. The skills of the competitors, according to tests, dates, among many other things. If a tournament is not naturally developed, it wouldn't be fair, and he wanted to win in a clean game. And the director enters. He had heard all of that from outside. He suspected something like that, so he came in person. So he had to deal with that as soon as possible, or else he would notify his superiors. Vinny was lost in thought. His mother was having more and more problems. And Mia and Jay's brother arrived just then, who was very sad because his mother asked him to get rid of the kit. And no one there could have him, except Ken was already very irritated. The next day they shouted at Jay that he had a call. It was urgent. All the members of the crew received this message. A new race had been scheduled for the competitors who had been disqualified. They had to show up again. On the other side of the crew, the ghosts were giving a beating to the giant white guy. This guy will be very important later. He is a hard guy to kill. He is friends with the drug dealer and is enormously strong. Later, the director along with his boys are gathered. The committee had given them a second chance. They look discouraged. They think if they face Monster, they would lose again, but he tells them that if they are going to fight a monster, they should also become one, but if they don't have guts, they should leave it there, and someone opens the door. It was a bald guy. Dom had cut his hair. He asks to handle that situation. They ask if he would join the army. And Ayuna likes his bald head. She asks to touch it, but his change was only to pay attention to the race. So starting tomorrow they will go train. He had something in mind. De Rossi had recommended going to Windchill Themp. That was a place with a monk who placed rollers on the riverbanks. If they didn't want to die, they shouldn't fall. He says with an evil look that if one falls, they all fall. They had to maintain balance. Being on the same team means friendship, trust, and solidarity. On another plane, Vinny's mother was waking up and asks how much the hospital bill was. Jay's mother gets angry. How her first words were those. She had to give her son's number to notify him immediately, but she takes his hand. In the car, she remembers what he told her. She wasn't going to charge him anything for the hospital, but she was going to ask her son to stop hanging out with Jake. Thanks to them, her son was crazy about racing and couldn't concentrate on his studies. But she refuses. She couldn't do that. She had never done anything for her son, so she couldn't keep him away from his friends. Returning to the guys, the training was very difficult. They were exhausted, and the water was very close. They ask what the hell they were doing on that rock, but Dom asks them to concentrate. He didn't want to die on an isolated mountain. The monk asks them to relax. They had to maintain their strength and spirit uniformly. The friends wonder if he was a cyclist before. After several hours of riding, a bee appears, and Minu loses his balance, pushing Jay. Who pushes Don? Who flies off? The monk laughs. It was a good dip. Everyone complains. They had been doing that for hours and hours. Don thinks his body felt very heavy after falling into the water. They shout at him that there was cotton in his clothes, so if they fell, they would have to bear the weight of their clothes. After 8 hours, their training finally came to an end, but they had to leave the mountain before it got dark. And the monk tells the story of how he met De Rossi. He was cycling when he met him. He had expressed that a worthy rival finally appeared, but he doesn't finish the story. He will leave the ending for another opportunity. The training was exhausting. Everyone wanted to quit. riding so long was useless. But Dom brings them back to reality. Did they not remember their defeat? Everyone had felt the fear of being chased by a monster. But the monk appears. They didn't know what it was like to be chased by a real monster, but he had a plan. Nearby farmers ask what the hell that noise was, and a wild boar makes an appearance. And in front of them was the hummingbird team. The monk believes it worked. They were riding better than yesterday. Minhu shouts at him if he was tired yet, he should speed up. And Dom, looking back, remembers Monster, putting all his strength into the pedals. He shouts at everyone that he would take care of the pig. They had to move aside, taking different paths, and seeing the lake, he expresses that he will pay for it by jumping. Water comes out. Today, they were going to have a barbecue. They agreed, but it was the monk's pet. He makes them reflect that thanks to him, they could ride in a unique way, and so they continued training day. And night. Derossi asks how his kids were doing. They were still very young, but they would grow exponentially in a very short time. And we focus on Dom in an abyss calmly, with an exquisite cadence. In the following days, they continued training, and the time had come, the rematch of the Street League. But before starting, only 2 teams will have the opportunity to compete for the finals. And now was the first mission, Death Race. The rules were simple. Each team will choose 3 riders who will represent them. All teams will race at the same time, and the first 4 will qualify in the first round. The teams were ready to compete, but the hummingbird team was missing from the list. If they didn't show up now, they would be disqualified. The competitors breathed a sigh of relief. The superstars were disqualified. TJ laughs. They would never come because they lost against Monster. The otaku regrets it. The Uchiha wouldn't come. They were going to disqualify them, but they are still there. It is heard. At their school, they say they finally arrived. They wondered why they came like that, how the hell their training was for them to look like that. The friends asked not to be asked, it had just been very hard. In the broadcast, they said the teams were ready. The headline for that race was that the hummingbird team was showing a strong impression with their gear. Scouts don't believe Dom is the one in the photo. Everyone is amazed by the appearance, and the 3 chosen for that race were Dom, Chelly, and Sungo. Everything was ready, the kid was cheering. On your marks, set, go. The white shirt guy says he was going to crush them, all those rookies. Only 4 teams survived this race. There was a lot of physical tension between the participants. The 2 teams racing in the lead were colliding. It was an intense battle. Things were getting out of control from the start. Pegasus believes he shouldn't waste energy, fighting from the start, but sees that the hummingbird team accelerates. Sun Go tells his team he was going to pedal like crazy. He asks if they agree. Dom tells him yes. Compared to those dozens of hours riding on that mountain, that distance was nothing. Sun Go asks them to follow him. He increased the pace. The hummingbird team was breaking away from the group and was flying towards the lead. Spectators and competitors are surprised. They were pushing themselves hard from the start. It was clear that later they would lose energy. TJ. Seeing that they separated, he also launches an attack. He also trained hard, putting on a fake J and a fake Binny to motivate himself. The other competitors had to conserve their energy to make it. However, the otakus also launch an attack. The green-haired guy didn't understand. It was terrible strategy to spend all the energy from the start. TJ. He catches up to them and tells Dom if that was all they had, but he wasn't even close. He hadn't even started yet, remembering everything that had happened those last 2 weeks. All his training and learning would be reflected in him, because everything depended on his mind. Fleeing with a hellish cadence, leaving behind TJ, Sun Ho, and Chelly. On the broadcast, they say that runner Don Kang had started going even faster than before. It was crazy. If he maintained that pace, his muscles would break. But it was as if his sprint was at the same level as Monster. He had moved away from his teammates. And he had completely separated from the group. And look at him ride. He's putting more distance between the group. They were convinced that he was using drugs. His race couldn't be real. The green-haired guy thinks that Guy must have been so broken with Monster that he trained like a maniac. The other competitors started to get terrified. If he continued like this, the slots would be reduced. Tactics no longer worked. Everyone starts to accelerate the pace. Sungo thinks Dom was definitely riding faster than before. Chelly says she was venting all her frustration from the last race and maintained an inhuman speed. A new monster was born. The monk, watching the television, laughs. He was proud. He had asked him for advice to improve as soon as possible. He never wanted to let his friends down again. He tells him his past about being rockin' and everything that changed. He didn't want to lose the bonds he had formed, but the responsibility was great. He calms him down. The more weight you feel, the stronger your mind will become. And the Hummingbird team has finished the first race. In first place, Domkam achieved his first objective. In second place, TJ's team. And third place went to the Otakus. And Zeroback finished in fourth place. And the final mission of the second race between 4 teams was 3 riders from each team will participate. 2 teams will combine as a single team. The competitors will discuss among themselves to decide who will face whom. And for the first time, if someone from their team finishes first, it won't be enough. 3 people will have to cross the finish line to win, and the winner will give way to the 2 teams that will go to the finals. Now, in the next 10 minutes, they had to decide their groups. The Zeroback guys immediately asked them if they wanted to team up with them, but our protagonists had no interest. TJ didn't want to collaborate with the Otakus, even in a joke. The Zeroback guys neither. Even seeing them was embarrassing, filling them with insults. The Otaku yells that they rot. They hadn't done anything wrong. Just because he liked different things didn't mean they should treat them like that. Leaving everyone in silence. And Vinny appears with a serious look. He asks them to collaborate. So the composition was the Hummingbird and Manga crew versus Zeroback and Zephyrus crew. TJ was too angry. The Otakus were saying words they didn't understand. He felt great admiration for the Uchiha, but Vinny asks him to stop looking at him. He was sick of him. Minu likewise asks, why was he still so kind to them? He usually only fought with everyone. Dinny only thinks that was a lie, but it reminded him a lot of his past, especially the words. That he was just different. Double PIJ. To stay still, sticking a sticker on him, they were going to win to face Monster in the finals. Their observing companions definitely hoped they would win. The race was about to start. They had to take positions. The Otaku tells him something. But they don't understand anything. The teams were ready. The second rematch was about to begin. Giving the shot that starts the race, the Zeroback was fighting for the lead. But in the blink of an eye, the Hummingbird team has passed Zeroback, and the Otakus followed them too. They were going to give their all from the start. The Zeroback guys shout that they should calm down. If they accelerated, they would run out of energy. But TJ refused. They should also accelerate from the start. The Hummingbird team had taken the lead. They wonder if this race would end the same as the first one. Dom expresses that it was fantastic. They should finish with the same energy, but Tejota thinks that race won't be as easy as they thought. Accelerating, even his friends are amazed. He looked better than before. That was because of all the training he had done. They were paying off. It made him sick to see that damn logo in front of him. Today the first place was going to be his. Passing Sun Go, Vinny, and Jay, he had prepared a small show for a day like this. Now they will have to see his butt for the rest of the race. Vinny didn't care. Jay thinks that idiot hadn't matured, and the Zero Duck guy tells them they should get out of there. If they didn't want to get hurt. TJ's plan was to crash into everyone so they could win. He will also join, so he was going to knock off the Hummingbird star, trying to push him so he would fall. But the Otaku appears. The Zero guy couldn't move him. He was incredibly strong. He tells Jay that they will stop him, so the 3 of them should separate from the group. TJ realizes that idiot couldn't even do one job right. Vinny tells him he will catch up, but Minu interrupts him. He would catch up to him. The two of them should concentrate on the final sprint, catching up to TJ and crashing into him. He tries to distract him, but TJ was incredibly beside himself. He asks him to listen to him. He was just a loser. He wasn't interested in a slow person like him at all. He hadn't done anything in the previous races, he just had to stay behind. What he was looking for was only those two. He knew him very well. Minwoo wasn't riding for passion, but to escape his damned reality. The otakus and Dezero continued fighting in the back, and TJ is seen passing them. Junzo asks what was wrong with Minwoo. He was very slow and unmotivated. He remembers the words, he also remembers his past, what happened with his parents. His father always treated him badly. After that incident, his sister always said it was all his fault, and all the comments penetrated his being. As for TJ, he takes the lead again. Even his friends are surprised, they didn't expect him to be that good. But the guy with glasses also appears in the images. Jay and Vinny pass a curve, but they are surprised. Jay hadn't done his specialty. Vinny thinks he was an idiot for still thinking about that. The leading team was just 500 yards away. However, the Zephyrio's team was running fiercely for the lead. TJ behind them says he has them now, accelerating his pace again and taking the lead. And to everyone's surprise, he turns in the middle of the road. It was clearly so they would crash into him. At least he was going to take one of them with him. However, someone enraged by the words spoken lunged from behind. The other competitors only saw a shadow pass by them, and Minwoo impacts TJ. Mia, seeing that, gets very worried. As he said, he hadn't done anything for his team. At least, now they hadn't been injured, and the Hummingbird team created the biggest gap, positioning themselves in the lead. But those following them were from the other groups. Jay just asks to have faith, they couldn't do anything else, and the first to cross the finish line were Jay and Vinny, but the next ones to arrive were the two people from the other groups, and the one following them was a zero back. Only 200 yards remained, and Manga Crew was too far behind. There was a clear winner. The otaku was too tired, he couldn't make it. He asks his waifu for forgiveness, he couldn't win. However, his friends ask him not to give up, they couldn't let it end like this. Shouting at him to go for the victory, pushing him with the power of Luffy and Gundam. It was his attack, Manga Pistol. The Zero guy just laughs, he didn't even know what they were shouting about. It was a clear victory, he just laughed out loud at them, but a bullet passes next to him. Shouting. Not even the audience knew what was happening. It was the strangest thing they had ever seen. It is explained to us that if he made that move, the air resistance was minimal, changing his speed to a unique speed. It was admirable, they had impressive technique, and the participant who finished in 5th place gave the qualification. It was the Manga Crew team. It was an incredible turn in the second race. Hummingbird and Manga Crew had a ticket to the final race. Everyone goes crazy, it had been a unique spectacle. All their training had borne fruit. Vinny, for his part, went to confront TJ about his behavior, but he couldn't even breathe. Then his friends tell him that he had tested positive for doping, but they had no idea what he had done. But they remember that guy with glasses gave TJ an energy drink, telling him that if he wanted to reach the finals it would help him. TJ, for his part, curses how the hell they arrested him for doping. Then the guys had a talk, they realized that drug altered their bodies. It enhanced their abilities, but it could be seen through the veins altering in the races. They conclude that TJ, the pineapple guy, and the redhead had consumed that to ride better. Jay thinks maybe T.A. didn't know he was using it, remembering his uncle's case. Then Minwoo didn't feel very well, he only felt like a burden to his team. Mia calms him down, he did things for the team that really helped him, she was always defending him. He was an indispensable piece. And the father is focused on. He wanted them to bring his son after classes. He is talking to Jay, and the bodyguards take him. His father, upon meeting him, complains to him. He had left home just to join a children's competition. He should be ashamed and return home. He avoids saying no, he has to forget about him and vote him out like he did with his mother. In another scene, It is shown that the giant guy was a competitor in a kickboxing league. TJ confronts the guy with glasses. Why did he do that? Taking him as a sign of a fight. Attracting everyone's attention, they accuse him of wanting to fight. He should get in the ring. But he didn't want to face that monster, so he runs away, but it wouldn't end like that. They were going to launch a surprise attack on the guy with glasses. He was walking down the street. TJ and his friends were ready to knock his head off. But in an instant, TJ and his friends could no longer move. He was a type to be feared. He only explains, he did that so a team wouldn't reach the final. Someone just sent him to do a job, they should just know that. Returning to Minu, it is revealed that his mother did not die, but is in a mental hospital. She had many panic attacks and sudden personality changes. The next day, Minu meets TJ on the street. Minu says here comes the doped one, but he replies that he was nobody to say that to him. His teammates had opined about him that he was only good because he used drugs. All his training and effort went to waste because of someone else, but instead, he remains in the competition thanks to his team. That was really sad. He didn't even know why he created Hummingbird. He had to admit that he only did it to escape his reality. He freezes, returning home. After a while, his father arrives shouting at him, telling him what a piece of shit son he was. If he wanted to start over, he should go abroad, but he just says he will never leave again. He will do whatever she tells him. His group of friends asks for Minu, but he didn't go to training that day either. Vinny asks what that idiot was doing. There wasn't much time left for the next round, and Jay receives a call. And again, without saying anything, he leaves. This guy appeared several times in the story, as an audience member and giving advice. It was told that he was a friend of his uncle. More precisely, from childhood, he used to race with him. It is also told that Hyori Lee was also a friend, and upon seeing his bike break the other day, he brought him a gift. Jay just turns around. He didn't want another bike, but he expresses that he knew the love he had for his old bike. But that one was also his uncle's. He had it until the doping incident. He didn't know what to do with it until he saw him. He had to try hard in his next race. His friends were amazed. It was an awesome bike. Vinny thinks he was finally complete. Before he had a huge disadvantage, he could finally give his best. Minu, after several days of not attending school, returns. The guys were training, like every day. Seeing them, they get excited. He asks him to change clothes to train. They hadn't seen him in days. He thinks he didn't feel very well tomorrow. Then everyone goes to a shoe store to buy cleats and accessories for them. He was going to give a gift to each of them. He had gotten an unlimited card from his father. He asks Vinny if he wouldn't choose anything, but he didn't want to. Minu asks him what was wrong, creating a very tense scene in the group. They also say they will go to his night training, but Minu couldn't. He had to take night lessons. Upon arriving home, he just says yes to his father with a smile on his face. As for Vinny, he arrives home and realizes that his mother hadn't taken her medication. She just tells him it didn't matter. Lately, she had been feeling very well, annoying Vinny, who leaves. Then upon arriving at his house, by the way, he trained with the tarantula girls. He arrives complaining that they should stop eating at his house. It wasn't a restaurant. In contrast, Minu is told that he should continue behaving like this, then he could take care of his businesses. He should stop hanging out with those friends. They were only leading him down the wrong path. Yuna interrupts him, but he just accepts he shouldn't worry anymore. He wouldn't go out anymore. Sooner or later, he would get rid of them. When he goes to the bathroom, he remembers his situation. The next day, they would finally see Jay with his new bike and his new equipment. They ask if Minu was ready, but he couldn't. They confront him, however he calms them down. They could do it without him. Nothing happened if he didn't train. Jay was the ace, and honestly the team rode very well without him. Vinny gets angry. What was he trying to say? Minu replies what was wrong with him, if he only joined to have fun, or his anger was due to his mother's costly surgery. If it was about that, he would tell his father to pay for it. Vinny is about to hit him, but Dom stops him. Minu must have had a good reason to say that, but he just states that it was true. He only joined to have fun. They misinterpreted things, only they wanted to win. He said that he, at one point, lost interest in cycling and that was it. But he will continue to provide moral support and will retire, leaving everyone thinking about what was happening. And the next day, the 6th phase had arrived. Our protagonist's team was incomplete, Vinny was missing, but surprisingly Minu arrived. In another scene, Vinny was in a hospital. But well, ladies and gentlemen, what you were waiting for, the 6th round of the Street League was about to begin. Today's race was a street race, a death match by teams. 4 riders from each team would participate. They will literally have to race on the street. Participants who are good at curves would benefit, as long as they don't deviate from the designated path. It didn't matter where they went. Any team participant who crosses the finish line wins. And the team they faced was against the tarantulas. Minu refused to race, they could ride better without him. Saying that Jay leaves, he is going to see how the track was. Dom leaves too. He wanted to take a break from Minu's attitude. In class, they tell the professor that the guys were going to race, so they would finally see them. The hummingbird team versus the tarantulas was starting. 3, 2, 1 and the race begins. Both teams start very well, and Jay is quickly clearing the way to the front. The woman tells him it was a shame Vinny didn't make it, but now she wouldn't feel guilty for beating them. Taking the lead, only 3 minutes into the race, the tarantula team had overwhelming speed. Don proclaims that Orange is his, giving way. With those cleats on, he could pedal with more power, overtaking her. The shoe guy says, "Holy cow, I knew he had gotten faster, but I never thought so much." He was in front of an alley. Monster had taken that curve at high speed before. He could do it too, but a kid, by chance, appeared on the path, causing Dom not to be able to take the curve well. Instead, the spider takes advantage. She had taken the lead. Dom asks, why the hell was he still so far behind? The track didn't help him at all. There were too many curves for sprint power. The spider had gained a lot of ground, and the participants behind, due to a new strategy. They wouldn't let our protagonists pass, but Jay uses his strategy, taking another path. The guys from the other team wonder what was happening, and in their distraction, Chelly and Junso take advantage to position themselves. They resign themselves. The 2 in front were reaching the finish line. It wouldn't do any good to waste their energy. The hummingbird team was trying to catch up to the leaders, but it was too late. The finish line was close for the leading competitors. Jay had taken a legal alley, but it was in terrible condition for riding, with very tight stairs. But Jay was handling himself very well. Don thinks he will lose at that pace. He couldn't catch up, his teammates also didn't know what Jay was doing, but Chaley remembers that he had seen the map before the race. And he went to see how it was. Everyone thinks the yellow helmet guy couldn't catch her anymore. The spiders had spun a very good strategy to beat them, and Jay is also shown at full speed. But to everyone's surprise, Jay appears in a second lane, a little further away from the leaders. But with the momentum of a bullet, leaving Dom behind. The spider asks how the hell he managed to catch up. His plan was perfect. Even Dom is surprised to see Jay. However, he was still very far. The victory belonged to the spiders. However, Jay didn't give up. His cadence and speed were starting to increase. 400 meters remained, and Jay was still 5 seconds behind the spider, and the protagonist sees another alley, taking it. The spider breathes a sigh of relief. It was the last lap and she would win. She apologizes, but this encounter was hers, taking the curve impressively. And they watched her. The one who reached the finish line was her. She looks to her right and realizes that Vinny had come, and looking to her left, someone comes down a ladder via a railing at full speed. But what was happening? Star J had appeared at the end of the race. For now, the tarantula was ahead by just a few centimeters. Only 20 meters remained to the finish line. No one knows what happened, who won, who crossed first. Dom asks who won, but both had entered almost at the same time. They were checking who finished first, and the winner of Group 5 by a few thousandths of a second was the Hummingbird team. Then the fan always wanted an autograph from his hero, and Vinny entered in that scene. He apologizes for being late. Minwoo confronts him. He was saying things about wanting to win and didn't even show up. He replies that something urgent had come up. Minwoo continues. Something more important than a tournament. Did his mother have another collapse? Even Dom tells him to shut up, and a blow from Vinny lands on him. All the teams turn to see what was happening. The Hummingbird group was fighting. Minwoo tells him that he accepted it to help him. At least he should say thank you. He was an ungrateful bastard. Dom gets angry. He was crossing the line. Junzo also confronts him. He takes the jacket and throws it. He resigns from that shitty crew. The next day, Minwoo is with his mother, who tells him that he must take care of his sister. And also his father. That angers him. How could he worry about someone who sent her to that dump and replaced her with another woman? The nurses chase him away. He couldn't be like that. Upon leaving, he only calls Mia, but she doesn't answer, and while waiting for her he sees that she is with Jay. He takes her hand. He had to talk to her privately, being rude, unintentionally hurting her, so Jay stops him. He tells him to stop bothering them. He felt too bad to talk to a guy like him. And he is hit by Jay, and they start fighting together. Mia asks them to stop. Minwoo just takes his backpack and leaves, but the protagonist tells him, come back. He had to stop being so annoying and return to the team. He had to ride again, but that only reminds him of TJ's words. What his father said. He returned home because he didn't want to run away anymore. He tried to buy things for them because he wasn't good enough to help them. But he wonders, why was everyone against him? What did he do to deserve everything that was happening? He asks what was the point of returning, what difference would it make? And a call comes in. It was from the hospital. The news reports a hospital patient who jumped from the 4th floor and died. Here we are shown a few days ahead, but what happened is being told as time passes. Minwoo arrives at class and is already in a good mood with his buddies. Dom asks him if he managed to sleep. He says yes. He thanks him for helping him with his mother's funeral. They were of great help to him. He continued as always, even playing basketball. Sungo thinks he was acting better than he thought. He was very calm. Jae-zo expresses that they came to wait for him. He just looks at them with a lost gaze. Then Mai waits for him to walk together. He tells her that he was fine, it had affected him less than he thought. Showing that smile again. And right at that moment, there was a family in the park. It was a family scene, and Minwoo stops. Mai turns and sees him, tears falling from Minwoo. He didn't know why he was crying. He rubs his eyes. He didn't understand what was happening and finally breaks the mask he was wearing. And tears of suffering, sadness, and melancholy are present. Mia only tries to restrain him. At his house, Vinny realizes that his mother had arrived. He complains to her again that she should have stayed there. She wasn't well. The mother calms him down. Nothing was wrong. She was well again. Vinny, remembering what happened to Minwoo, shouts at her. Mom, please never abandon me. I don't know what I would do without you. As for Sungo, he was training hard. He felt so good, a burden to his team. He hadn't done anything to help them, so he had to try hard. Back home, he was very tired. He couldn't even move his legs, and in front of him, there was a group of subjects. Stuttering, he says if he could help them. The next day, he didn't show up to school. It must be due to the flu, so Minwoo had to train with them in case he got sicker. But he just thinks he would be a burden to the team in those conditions. Mia didn't know what to do with Minwoo. He had helped her in her worst moment. She felt obligated to help him. So an idea occurs to her. They would go to the beach. He clearly accepts. It was an outing with Mia, but when he was already imagining his afternoon with Mia. On the bus, he hears a familiar voice. Dom, Jay, Vinny, Chelly, and Yuna had appeared. He curses. He knew it was too good to be true. Chelia expresses that now it looked like a trip for couples of 3. Dom affirms it. Junzo is also shown to us with an injured arm and a broken bicycle. Then they spent a very pleasant day. They trained and rode bicycles along the seashore, admiring the view. And Mia increases her feelings for Minho. On another plane, the giant and the one with glasses appeared. He had told them that they had to beat the hummingbirds, that Sang-o had recommended that task to them. Sang-o is the white-haired one. If they won, they would give him 10% of everything. On the other hand, they were sharing on the beach, and Dom stole a drink from his father. He only took a little, but he got drunk to the veins. And Minho and Mia were alone. He liked the sea. He says that his sister also really liked the waves. Also on her part, Yuna says they had another sister. One day, they got very excited because they would take her to an island for their mother's birthday. The sister couldn't contain her excitement. They had a very good relationship with their sister. They loved her too much. She was the soul of the family. And they went to buy a gift for their mother with all their savings. In a lapse of attention, Minho went to see a friend, and Yuna started talking to a classmate. When her sister was amazed by the ring they would give their mother, the ring fell. She went out after him, and a crash was heard throughout the perimeter. When Yuna asks for her sister, she only sees a crashed car and a ring covered in blood. From that day on, their family broke. Their mother fell into depression, and the two of them, telling their story, say it was their fault. When Minho arrives, he asks what was wrong. They looked very serious, and when Dom wakes up, he only sees things dancing. And he vomits on her and one. To apologize, he sets off fireworks, and Vinny started drinking the shot Dom brought. And the spider passed by, who upon looking at him already idolized him, and upon seeing her, he only saw dancing silhouettes. Then they drink it too, and they were drunk as hell. Jay, looking at the beach, sees Minho asking him out. Upon returning, Vinny doesn't even remember what he did, but there was a very good photo, and in front of them the two were walking very flushed. Because they were holding hands. Upon arriving at Junzo's house, he just apologizes. He had had an accident. He fell off his bicycle and rolled to his house, but Vinny asks him to tell the truth. He tells them he didn't understand the situation very well. They asked him a question and started hitting him. He couldn't defend himself. Vinny Dom asks whose they were. He had to tell him everything he knew about them. He just apologizes for being a dead weight. He knew that the upcoming races were very important. On another plane, the gang leader was planning another robbery. They had to injure a team to take them down, looking at a photo of Jay. After class, he sees Mia alone, but she was with Minho. After seeing that, he just looks at the ground. Later, the team was training. He looked very distracted, also very unmotivated, even reviewing the bike. Then back at his house, he runs into the subjects who hit Sungo. They ask for his bicycle. They weren't going to do him any harm. He takes off his backpack, passes it to the subject, and gets on his bike. He had to escape. They never expected that move. They had to catch up to him immediately. They had to do their job well. They get on their motorcycles to catch up to Jay. Yuna and Minho were passing by and see the protagonist passing by, being chased. Minho runs out immediately, calls Dom. Jay was being chased by some guys on motorcycles. Jay just ran and ran. He had been escaping from them for about 20 minutes, and they were about to catch him. And they ask him to duck, and a stick passes over his head, and the guy on the motorcycle receives a blow to the face. It was Vinny. He had arrived. He asks if they were the ones who hit Sungo. They just say they should move. It was 2 against 15. They had to disappear, and a shadow appears among them, who grabs him by the helmet and slams him against the pavement. Seeing that they were going to kill them, Chelly also arrives. But Jay shouts at them not to approach, and upon saying that they were going to hit him, but Minho arrives to save him. They were going to hit Minho, but Jane reacts by hitting him with the helmet. Binny is hit and sent to the ground, but his friend appears. If they wanted their skulls crushed, they had to come for him. The boss says, beaten up by some students, they were pathetic. The leader just laughed. Money could control people that easily. They grab Dom among everyone, and a stick is broken on his head. Finally, they had finished with that guy, but behind him, Dom was standing. It was time to start fighting for real. They were going to break Vinny's bike, but Minho saves it, and the guy next to the boss comes out to fight, tackling Dom. He was clearly stronger than normal. Vinny defends him, but something passes at full speed next to his face. He asks if they thought this was a children's game, with a knife in his hand. The leader expresses that this was getting interesting, and the giant was no longer next to him. He had gone down. The group members, upon seeing him, tell him he had arrived too late, but his face hits the pavement. He tells Dom to fight him. Vinny's friend is about to hit him, but he is knocked down with a single blow. He asks Dom again, he had to come for him. Vinny goes to avenge his friend, but the bald guy prevents him, he had to fight him. The boss thinks they were taking too long, so he was going to stab Vinny, but the sirens are heard. Chelly was coming with them. On the other hand, the white-haired one is told that he must put on a good show. They had paid a lot for this competition, they should get rid of the hummingbirds. But he already had everything under control, and Hummingbird versus Scorpion appeared on the screen. The leader lectures him, they had messed up, but they had another chance, they had to finish them in the race. The next day Junzo arrives at school. He takes off the gauze and says he was fine, he could ride, but Minu tells him not to worry. He is going to take his place. At night during training, Dom tells him that he had thrown that away, he shouldn't throw it away again. But Vinny confronts him. Did he think he would come back whenever he felt like it, or did he think this was a simple game? He replies that at that time, he felt that leaving her would help them. He didn't think he was contributing anything. He thought that if he couldn't help them by riding, he could help them with money. And from that moment, his life was ruined. He couldn't ride with so many problems. He apologizes. He complains that he should have at least told them what had happened, but recalling everything that had happened to him. He just curses and turns away. Minu says with a smile, "I won't run away again." Upon arriving home, his father was furious. He was involved in fights again and was riding again. Minu calms him down. Now he had a responsibility, just like him with the company. He had been irresponsible. He had convinced them, but he left them. He should act like a man. So he asks him please to let him ride with his friends again. They walk together again after 10 years. Minu was blinded. What he told him wouldn't convince him, but his father expresses to him. He was acting like a responsible person, and if he was going to compete, he had to make sure to win that damn thing. Then they continued training until the big day, and the 7th round was about to begin. The crew was gathered, and in the distance the gang is seen. Dom gets furious and is about to hit him, but Yuna stops him, and the masked one kicks him. The otakus calm him down, they start insulting each other mutually. Pegasus says all right, but and an epic scene of the crew versus the gang members gathers. The presenter appears, and they are going to speed things up. The 7th match was a round without rules. Yes, that's right, no rules. 5 members from each team will compete. The course consists of 18 kilometers in total. Whoever completes the circuit will be the winner, and those who would compete against our crew were Scorpion. Thinking about it, they realized that this was all arranged from before. That's why they tried to injure them, but now they just had to focus on winning. And in a race, they kicked each other. Literally, that's what they meant by a race without rules. Group 3 was ready, they had to take positions. The atmosphere was full of morbid curiosity. Everyone knew that race would be bloody. On your marks, set. The race between Hummingbird and Scorpion had begun. They were betting on the hummingbirds, it was a very good competition, but everything was going as they had planned. The Hummingbird team started faster than usual, and the Scorpion team was behind. But little by little, they were getting closer. The race was difficult from the start. They threatened to kick Minu out. He asks that they should move away. If one fell, they would be in trouble. So No decides to leave. He will move as far away as possible, activating his hellish pedaling, taking the lead with several seconds advantage. The Scorpio guy says what the hell were they doing, they had to catch up, and the one who hit before breaks away. Catching up to Dom, entering an alley where the drone couldn't record, pressing Dom's face against the wall. No one knows what happened, but upon exiting the alley, fresh blood gushed from Dom's cheek. Chell and Jay were just behind. They mock. They must have been so scared that they fell behind. But Vinny appears from inside, wanting to overtake. Vinny Hong from the Hummingbird team was passing in front of everyone. They just laugh, and the duck mask guy was behind him. He tells Dom that he should give up and look around. They were going to end up losing, but Dom replies that he should look to his right. Vinny appearing, causing Vinny to push him and take the lead. He asks Dom to stop them. He tells his friend that they should go against the redhead. He refuses. The strategy was to follow the mustached guy so he wouldn't pass, but he wanted to make a new strategy. Dom was going to save energy for the final stretch, so he positioned himself behind him, but the two people positioned themselves next to Vinny in an instant. And they push him to hit him, but Vinny breaks with his cleats and manages to dodge, making him almost crash into Dom. Vinny tells him he had to be careful of the left. The guy had an iron bar, which they placed between the spokes of Dom's front wheel, causing Dom to fly through the air at high speed. That was their plan from the beginning. If they managed to knock Dom down, they would win. Dom tells them not to worry about him. They had to win no matter what. And seeing his destroyed bicycle, sadness overcomes him. He remembers everything that happened with her. The broadcast wonders what was happening now. Scorpion was in the lead, leading with 2 people. No one knew what had happened in that tunnel. Only 3 kilometers remained to reach the finish line. The Scorpion team accelerated the pace and had 3 participants at the head. They knew about that fact about the guy. Now they just had to ride with all their strength. They tell Vinny that he should stay behind or else he would end up like his teammate, and the guy in front kicks his wheel with his leg, causing Vinny to lose all momentum, falling behind. Now they were in the final stretch of the race. The finish line was close. Scorpion led with a clear advantage. They would surely be the winner. Their sprinter was in the lead, while the Hummingbird sprinters were too far behind. Minhu was waiting, and the time had come, accelerating his cadence, and only 1,500 meters remained to reach the finish line. Even the fan says it was frustrating. He asks Jay to do something. Only 1,000 meters remained. Dom, clenching his fist, asks Minhu that now it was his turn, so his team could pass. They smile relieved. The competition was for them, and Minhu passes by him. He was pulling Chelly and Jake with impressive speed. Resistance and air were null. They shout that they were catching up. They had to accelerate the pace. 800 meters remained to reach the finish line. They were almost at the end of the race, and Homie Fef pedaled like crazy. Minhu was doing something impressive. He was doing a sprint within a sprint. Minhu from the Hummingbirds was attacking with something never seen before, and there they saw him. He positioned himself at the head and takes the lead. He tells him that a curve was coming here. Things were going to get more interesting. Minhu was exhausted, sees the curve. He couldn't take it anymore. They crash into him. He had to stay behind to recover his breath. But Minhu smiles. It was all part of the plan. They shout at him to forget about him. There were more riding behind him. A hummingbird passes by. Jay was riding at an incredible speed, and only a few meters remained to the finish line. The boss shouts what the hell were they doing? They had to catch up. They argue that they were trying to. They were giving their best, but they couldn't catch up. Minhu affirms. They had to keep trying, but unfortunately for them, Jay at that moment was unstoppable. Here it is explained that everything was planned from the beginning. It had all been a strategy by Minhu. They kept Jay hidden the whole time. He was always behind, saving energy for the final moment. They had been trapped in the wings of the hummingbirds, and Hummingbird was the winner. The Scorpion team was eliminated with an 8-second lead. They won the race in an excellent way. The white-haired one just curses. Those damned guys couldn't even do one job well. And the guys gather, they thank Minhu. He was the brain of the team, and he had something to tell them. He and Mia were dating, holding hands in front of everyone, but they already knew. It took them too long to say it. Well, except Dom. Dom had no idea. Zungo neither. And Jay just looked at the ground. On Scorpion's part, he was left with a trauma after the race. On the white-haired one's part, he remembers Jay's uncle, saying that he didn't do it, holding his head. He couldn't handle the remorse. Scorpion gathered to receive his money, but they had ruined it. They wouldn't give him anything, so he pulls out a low blow. But the giant knocks him down with one blow. Later at night, they were all lying down together, and Minwoo says that Mia gave him a bracelet. So he bought her an engagement ring. The next day, they were going to meet up, and Jay appears there because he was on his morning training. And he asks him if he thinks she would like the ring, and the short guy watched him. If it weren't for that damn kid, his life wouldn't be ruined. Jay tells him that Mia will love her gift. He should enjoy his date. He thanks him, he will see him later, and looking back, he shouts at Jay. Mia was waiting for Minwoo, and she only sees an ambulance passing. And in the scene, a bracelet and rings stained with blood come out. We see Yuna crying, her father in shock, Chelly, Vinny, Dom, and Junso frozen. Mia crying, Jay screaming at the nurses. Here it is clarified that the competition was postponed for 3 months due to the winter season. The friends wonder where Jay could be. A month had already passed since that incident, showing Jay's poster on the streets. His mother was completely ashamed of him. She tells her brother that she only had one son. He should try hard and not end up like his brother. He just cries and asks him to come back. Dom receives a call. Apparently, they had found a guy like the one in the photo, but upon arriving at the place, it clearly wasn't Jay. He didn't even look alike. In the hospital, Mia opens the curtains. It is very dark. She asks him if he wanted to get some fresh air, and Minwoo appears with an eye patch in bed like a soulless body. On Chelly's part, they ask her to return to England, but upon seeing Jay's photo, she just bites her lip. But upon seeing the other one, she realizes something and Junso walk together, and she tells him that her brother would never be the same again. He would never be able to walk again, and in front of them they were gathered. Yuna, upon seeing him, just cries. She had told him to eat all the food. Now he was very thin. They talk about the competition, and Vinny just says they should quit. They couldn't ride in that situation. He had to apologize. They shouldn't worry about his mother now. Dom looks at him with his head down. Full of guilt, he says yes. They had to quit. TJ visits him and tells him that his team had broken up. He just laughs and curses. On Dom's part, he is with Vinny, who by the way was working at the construction company. They say only 1 month is left for the competition, and they offer him a job to build good muscles. He accepted to spend time with Vinny, and the giant appears out of nowhere, but he wasn't looking for them. But rather this guy, who tries to run away. It is clarified to us that they were brothers. Chelly is on her way somewhere, and Jay is shown. It is told that the protagonist arrived with the monk devastated, without desire to live, but now. In those moments, he was better. But he, someday, will have to come down from there. He accepts it, he was there to escape reality. Remembering what happened, and behind them Chelly appears, furious, with teary eyes. Shouting she had no idea how much she looked for him, bastard, hitting him again. She doesn't know what he made her go through. In contrast, Minwoo had gathered them to ask for explanations on how they were going to dismantle the crew. Without asking him, Dom just apologizes, but Vinny confronts him. How could they continue in the competition? He was paralyzed from the waist down. Chelly and they don't even know where they are, or if he plans to ride during the week. He replies that yes, that was exactly what he wanted, but if they quit now, he doesn't think he can live. He asks them please, they had to do it for him. She alone remembers seeing a child when Dom bought his first bike, his first training sessions on the Monk's Hill, his trip to the beach, his last competition and all his friends. He starts to tremble and cry. A girl asks him why he was crying, and upon seeing her she was identical to his sister, but he snaps back to reality. And he ignores her, and she upon seeing that gives him something and leaves, tells him to eat that and he will stop crying. The 3 of them were gathered. They didn't know what to do, but Dom affirms they had to compete, even if there were only 3 of them. They were going to win, they had to do it for Minwoo. On Jay's part, he was racing against the monk. Jae was at full speed, but remembering the good moments he had spent with his friends. And a branch crosses in front of him, and next to him, the monk appears writing without hands, expressing that the pines were very beautiful. And Jae just tried to catch him at all costs. He asks him to relax a little, he had to see beyond him. That limited view would tire him out. They had bet on releasing a piece for Chelly. She wanted him to lose so she could sleep with him, but Arrow appears. The monk would never lose, and the monk stops watching. It was time to sweat, taking the handlebars and accelerating, leaving Jae far behind, very far behind. And he remembers a teaching from his uncle, placing his hand close if he focused on only one thing. He couldn't see what was around him. If he backed up, he could see many more things. He didn't understand it at the time, but when he grew up he would understand it. And in front of him appeared the same one asking how much longer he was going to stay there, hitting him. The monk asks how much longer Jae was going to take, but he was on the ground with his arm on his head. Crying. At night, the monk DeRoss and Jae were sleeping together, but he couldn't sleep because of the snoring. So he gets up and finds Chaley. He asks her if the others hated him for what happened. And he couldn't stand being there anymore, he had to go back. On Vinny's part, the little girl had escaped from her room and saw him with Minu, but they catch her. And her plush toy stays with her, and the day of the 7th round was about to begin, but the hummingbirds still showed no signs of life. So these guys say sorry for the delay, pretending to be the hummingbird team. They had entered, it was TJ and his friends, since they knew they wouldn't come, they disguised themselves as them. They start greeting everyone, and Dom appears saying, "What the hell are you doing?" coming face to face with them. The otaku never thought he would see that. Shadow Clone Jutsu. And the Street League was back. There were many more people than in the first season. It was very exciting. Minu was watching what was happening, and the TV remote control falls from his hand, and when trying to reach it, someone appears and he falls out of bed. They ask him a favor. They had to dress up like the others to feel that his team was complete. Yes, it was better like this. But Shelly asks whose bitch that was. And the 8th race would be a street fight. 5 players from each team in a 16-kilometer race of curves. They start side by side, but the path gradually narrowed, and whoever exits the alley first wins. They were going to start in 30 minutes, and the Punk Price team was facing the Hummingbirds. It was these guys who attracted many girls. They were the typical idols, but of bicycles. Literally, they were BTS, but riders. Chen tells him that he found Jae, and maybe he came to race. In the previous race, the Ghost wins, who had become buffed thanks to a D he stole from his brother to train. 10 minutes left to race, and Jimin's double tells him that they should have a fair race. Junso extends his hand to him, but he goes directly to Chelly, introducing himself. Finally they met and Jae appears, asking what was going on. Dom runs to him, telling him, "You son of a bitch, Vinny will kill you." Junso is happy. Jimin gets angry upon seeing that. He had to keep his eyes on the hummingbirds. The competition was about to start. The female audience tells them they should beat those squids. Don asks if he looked like a squid, but upon seeing Jae and Vinny, they take it back. They were quite well. The 2 most popular groups in the competition, Punk Price versus the popular Hummingbird. Everyone shouted, from the BTS side, the women, and from the Hummingbird side, the audience present. On your marks, set, go. Don thinks he should go as fast as possible from the start, and petals were in the air. The BTS audience was throwing petals. Minu watched his friends from the hospital. Don shouts that they should stop throwing those things, but for him they weren't, squid head. And ahead, someone was accelerating the pace. Did they want to finish the race quickly? Vinny asks him to keep his head in the race. Before he had said that he should lead. Junso tells him that they should stay together, he was going to lead them. They were going to make up for their lost time. Jungkook tells Jimin that he shouldn't go too fast. He would get tired very soon. He just states that there was a drone, and it gave him his best angle, winking at him. Even the white-haired one changes the channel to avoid seeing that. Jimin shouts that it was their turn now. They should take formation. Dong asks what the hell they were doing, but Junsi thinks they were trying to block them. Like the spiders. If they reach that curve first, they would never win. They ask Yi what they should do, but he remembers what Minwoo told him recently. He tries to stop him, but Minwoo moves his hands away. What was he doing there? He just apologizes. He asks him if he had only come to apologize to him. He had thought about ending all that. That was what he always should have done. Minwoo just clenches his fist, watching the television. Punk Price was accelerating in formation. It looked like an idle dance routine. If they did it in that curve, they would have a huge advantage. Jimin expresses that if that was a loss, he was an idiot. He would crash in and ask the blonde girl out. Vinny gets pissed off. How long would they go behind them? He will do it on his own if no one else did. Chelly tells him she will help him, but she couldn't leave Jay alone. However, she counters. He would be fine, so they should follow her. Dom is also going to break loose, but Junzo tells him no. He should sprint when he tells him to. He had to wait for the right moment, and Jay, with a lost look, positioned himself behind him. The monk expresses that Jay was much calmer than ever. Two of the hummingbirds were breaking the formation to take the lead. They changed to a defensive formation. It was excellent coordination that didn't let Binny pass, but Chelly appeared from the side. They realize it, so they try to stop her, however. She dodges him and accelerates. Competitor Chelly had broken the formation and taken the lead. Jimin couldn't let that happen. He speeds up and positions himself and leads the race again. Junzo, looking back, tired from pulling the two of them, sees a gap in the formation, and now was the moment. He had to give it. Jimin boasted about his victory with Chelly. If he beat her, they would go eat. But they shout at him that he didn't have time to flirt. He just says it doesn't matter and continues flirting, and a beast passes by him. Dom had come out of the underworld from the back to position himself in the heaven of the lead. He was even faster than the last time. He was totally possessed. They had called him Squid Face. Jimin didn't understand. That guy was always the star. Nobody ever said anything to him. It couldn't be. How was he riding so fast? He couldn't catch up. Dong from the Hummingbird team seems to have found the perfect time for the sprint. He was riding at full speed. But the curves made the race difficult for him. If it were in a straight line, there would be a clear winner, but Jimin lay behind him, bumping shoulder to shoulder. Vinny tries to accelerate, but they don't let him pass. Vinny doesn't care about that, and the guy thinks something passed by him. There went the person who had evolved as a competitor. It was time to hunt. Jay had finally made his move. Minwoo was watching the race, and the little girl asks him what he was doing. The race was getting really intense between those two competitors, but it seemed like Dom Kang was losing energy with every pedal stroke. The girl says that was great and asks him if he knew how to ride a bicycle. His wish was to ride a bicycle with other children, but his mother and doctors didn't allow it. Dom curses. Another curve was coming. Jimin was an expert in those curves. It was the best scenario for him. It is explained to us that reducing speed and regaining power was the hardest thing for Dom. He was going to lose in that game. J-Hope says it was a very close race, but their leader was the clear winner. But he spots Jay. Upon seeing him, he has a very bad feeling, hitting Shelly and trying to overtake. Shelly loses her balance and crashes onto the pavement. However, Jay saves her, accelerating at full speed. They shout at Jimin to be faster. His star was coming to his house. The finish line was a few meters away, and the disguise had completely changed. Jimin had taken advantage of competitor DOM. He was confident he would be among the winners, but in a lapse of attention upon not seeing an iron bar because he saw the shouts of the people. He flies through the air. It is told to us what happened to Yi and Minwoo. He tells him that he just wanted to die. He confronts him. He kept worrying about himself. He was the one going through a difficult situation, and he came to see him after a month. To tell him that, he had to leave immediately, but he holds him. He will return after the game. He will win, and they will talk later. Returning to the race, he also crashes Dom by flying, having a collision between the two. leaving the path impassable. J-Hope tries to pass on the edge, but he also crashes into some boxes that were there. Just before the finish line, an accident occurred on a narrow path. Jay from the Hummingbird team was approaching. He had to slow down. Jay remembers Chelly. He tells her she was always selfish. He also remembers Minu, saying he only worried about himself, and his uncle, who told him he had to look around and not focus so much on studies. Everyone asks him to stop. He had to stop now, but he uses Jimin's helmet to jump over everyone. And seeing J-Hope on the floor, he shifts gears, braking, looking his body backward with an excessive movement. He does a 360, and there came the Hummingbird team. They win the next phase. Jay, the super rookie, had evolved into a super monster. And well, people, that was today's video. I hope you liked it. If so, please give it a like. And comment something nice. I read all comments, although I never reply to all, but I always read them all. And there is very good news. This video has a second part. If it reaches 18,000 likes, I will release the second part. There is windbreaker for a while because there are still 200 more chapters to summarize, and it is. Thank you very much for the support you give me.